Chapter 379. Yoon Jin's red lips parted slightly as she sighed. I wonder if this information is enough for you to help Ijia once. Gong Yimo rolled her eyes. It's fine if you don't want to guard the imperial mausoleum, but you don't want to give birth to this child, do you? If she gave birth to this child, how much trouble would it bring to Kim Yoon in the future? Yoon Jin glared at her. Can't you see that Gong Dai is right there? Even if Gong Yimo knew the reason, couldn't she be a little more reserved? But now wasn't the time to be reserved. She gritted her teeth and said, if I didn't want to give birth to him, guarding the imperial mausoleum wouldn't be a problem at all. At this moment, a trace of helplessness flashed through her eyes. Ijia really has no other way, otherwise, Ijia wouldn't have come to beg you. Gong Yimo raised her brows slightly and said slowly, since you've said that, I do have an idea. Hurry and say it. Ignoring Gong Dai's strange gaze, Yoon Jin hurriedly said. Gong Yimo didn't keep her in suspense and said softly, you just have to be buried with the previous emperor. You. Yoon Jin thought that Gong Yimo didn't want to help her at all and gritted her teeth hatefully. However, Gong Yimo continued. Let Kim Yoon give the child's father a piece of land, then change your name and marry him. Wouldn't this kill two birds with one stone? You and the person you love live together, and those officials in the court won't always find fault with you just because they don't like you. Moreover, when you're in the fief, won't you be able to do whatever you want? Even Kim Yoon won't be able to control you. Gong Yimo smiled slyly. Of course, this also depends on whether your child's father is willing to be a shield. After all, you're no longer the Empress Dowager, who knows if he's sincere towards you. But even if you aren't the Empress Dowager, with Kim Yoon's respect for you, even if that person becomes the head of a territory, it wouldn't be a problem for him to still respect you. It had to be said that Gong Yimo's words really hit the bottom of Yoon Jin's heart. She hated being stared at by those old courtiers the most and corrected her mistakes. If she was buried with the late emperor, she could still reverse her infamy and gain a good reputation. Moreover, Kim Yoon had been keeping an eye on her recently, preventing her from finding a man. If she went out of town, even if she was no longer the Empress Dowager in name, would Wang Jing dare to not comply with her? Wouldn't she be able to get whatever she wanted? However, she was a little worried that Wang Jing, who had always been obedient, would change. However, she had Kim Yoon to back her up, so she was not afraid of anything. With that thought in mind, she asked softly, what if Yoon doesn't agree? Gong Yimo said with a smile, I'm a very trustworthy person. If I say I'll help you, I'll definitely help you. This matter, just leave it to me. Gong Yimo was also smiling when she came out of Yoon Jin's place. However, Gong Dai's expression was a little inexplicable. Gong Yimo thought that he was shocked by Yoon Jin's pregnancy and couldn't help but say, are you shocked? How can there be such a bold woman in this world? Gong Yimo led Gong Dai to their residence with ease. She remembered the entire Yuheng Imperial Palace very clearly. Moreover, Kim Yoon was really fast. The traces that she had burned back then were almost nowhere to be seen now. It was as if that incident had never happened. Gong Dai followed behind her and suddenly asked, Royal sister, why are you helping her? After all, Yoon Jin was unfaithful. Even if she was found out, she deserved to be punished. Gong Yimo rubbed her chin and raised her eyebrows slightly. Don't you think this is very interesting? She chuckled. Back then, this woman made things difficult for me and made things difficult for me. Now that I've set her up, there's nothing bad about it. She was too well protected. Even after becoming the Empress Dowager, she was still so naive. She didn't think that if she wasn't the Empress Dowager and that man became the head of the land, how could he still be manipulated by her? Even if Kim Yoon supported her, it would be too far away. When that time comes, it'll be fine if she behaves herself. If she's still like this, then her life will be very exciting. I'll be able to take revenge while I'm at it. Speaking of this, she sighed softly. And there's still an unborn child. It's innocent. If it can live, then let it live. Gong Dai's cold and handsome face suddenly looked a little conflicted. He looked at Gong Yimo's flat stomach and said regretfully, Royal sister, do you like children very much? He was a little annoyed. If they didn't have this blood relationship, it would be great to have a child like Royal sister. It would be very blissful. It felt as if he had a big royal sister, just like Momo when they were young. It was the second thing he looked forward to. Gong Yimo was stunned, then she burst out laughing. Gong Dai frowned slightly. This was clearly a sad thing. Why was the royal sister still laughing? Gong Yimo saw that she was looking at her. She stopped smiling and said proudly, "Oh you're not even fully grown yet and you're already thinking of such nonsense. I'm not going to talk to you." Her words caused Gong Dai's face to darken. In Gong Yimo's world, she was still half a year away from 18. She was indeed very young. But wasn't this world better? Gong Dai gritted his teeth. If it wasn't for the fact that there were people coming and going on the palace road, he would definitely let the royal sister see if he was fully grown. The two of them bickered like this and a day passed. The next day, Kim Yoon's coronation ceremony arrived as scheduled. Gong Yimo heaved a sigh of relief. She really came at the right time. At this time, Kim Yoon had already finished tidying up. Wearing a dragon robe and a golden crown, he was simply too handsome. Because this outfit suppressed the feminine parts of his body, leaving only a heroic and handsome aura. The heavens were really biased. Gong Yimo looked at the beauty in front of her, but she forgot that in other people's eyes, she was also a great beauty. She was the product of the heavens' favoritism to the bones. Hearing Gong Yimo's words, Kim Yoon slightly frowned. There were still 2 hours before the coronation ceremony, but now, he was having a headache for his mother. "Do you really want to do this?" Kim Yoon was unwilling in his heart, because he was afraid that without him watching over her, his mother would become more and more unscrupulous. He was also afraid that without the identity of the Empress Dowager, someone would bully her. Looking at it like this, they didn't look like mother and son, but more like father and daughter. "Do you have a better idea?" Gong Yimo retracted her admiring gaze and said with a solemn expression, "If you don't get rid of her identity as the Empress Dowager now, it's very likely that the one who will inherit your position in the future won't be your child, but your younger brother." Her words were a bit heavy, but Kim Yoon had always listened to her words. Hearing this, he couldn't help but reveal a thoughtful expression. But in his heart, he felt that it wasn't important who would inherit the throne. In the end, that person had the qualifications and ability to sit in this position. His thoughts were easily detected by Gong Yimo. She couldn't help but smile and call out softly, "Kim Yoon." He raised his head to look at her. A pair of sparkling eyes, as well as a cinnabar mole at the corner of his eye, made him look indescribably beautiful. At such a young age, he held great power in his hands, and he was handsome. Kim Yoon had already obtained the best of everything in this world. Gong Yimo sighed slightly and said with a heavy heart, "Do you know that you are the emperor now?" Chapter 380. Kim Yoon was shocked. In fact, everything had happened too naturally. He did not know much about the change in status. Was there a difference between being an emperor and being a prince? Gong Yimo sighed. Now, she felt like she was the old mother. From now on, you are the emperor of Yuheng. You no longer belong to yourself. Your only responsibility and obligation is to make Yuheng prosper. Everything in the past is in the past. From now on, what you yearn for and care about should be the country of Yuheng. Kim Yoon's eyes suddenly flashed with pain. He understood what Gong Yimo meant. But, was this the price to pay for being an emperor? He looked at Gong Yimo and frowned slightly. "Can't I even choose the woman I like?" Gong Yimo covered her mouth and smiled. "That's great. I'm really flattered that you all like me so much. But, have you ever thought about reality?" Although she was smiling, her tone was serious. "If you really marry me, do you think I can bring more benefits or more disadvantages? Not to mention the benefits, the disadvantages were more obvious, right?" Kim Yoon was no longer the Kim Yoon of the past. He stood high and saw far. If he wanted to marry Gong Yimo, it would be impossible before she handed over the firearms. Even if he could keep the position of empress empty and not take any concubines, would the courtiers agree? Would the people of Yuheng agree? He was not doing this because he loved Gong Yimo, but because he was causing trouble for her. Even if he took a step back and thought about it, what if she really married him? This fantasy was sweet, but he did not dare to think about it in the past. Now that he thought about it, he could only sigh sadly. Gong Yimo was not someone who would belong to any country. If she really married Yuheng, with Gong Dai's character, he would definitely start a war. Even if they were willing to start a war over a woman, Moa was the last thing she wanted to see. Moreover, in the future, when the four countries developed, they would be neck to neck. Gong Yimo could not be the sole owner of a country, or else it would break the balance. The reason why there was no problem now was because the four countries were in a stage of transformation and had no time to care about each other. But in the future, with Moa's intelligence, if she were to get married, people would definitely think that she was biased towards her husband's country, which would cause dissatisfaction from other countries. Perhaps this was also the reason why she was unwilling to hand over the firearms and was unwilling to get married. She was much more farsighted than he was. Seeing that he did not speak, Gong Yimo sighed. Balance means development. It's not that I'm overestimating myself, but based on the current situation, I won't marry any monarch. This isn't marriage, it's more like shifting the blame onto someone else. She joked with herself in a relaxed tone. And Kim Yoon immediately thought of the oath that Gong Dai made in front of everyone when he broke the ladder. Gong Dai must have understood this point long ago, so he swore that he would never fight for the throne. He was really prescient. Kim Yoon smiled bitterly. Gong Yimo saw his miserable expression and could not help but comfort him. Brother Kim Yoon, you have to believe that there is no lack of people in this world. They come and go, it doesn't matter. When a person is empty, there will be countless people to replace him. No one will accompany you to the end. Life is a journey of enjoying parting and giving up. Kim Yoon's heart ached. You wouldn't say this in the past. Such sad words shouldn't come out of your mouth. Gong Yimo blinked and smiled. Her expression changed, like an elf. You feel sad. But I don't think so. After one person leaves, you get another person. This is a kind of gain, isn't it? How can your eyes only see the back of one person leaving, but not the smile of another person coming? You have to know that there are two sides to everything. I've always told you to look at the other side. Look at you. Have you forgotten again? Kim Yoon suddenly grabbed her finger. His expression was sincere and somewhat fearful. But what can I do? I only want one person. Can't I even have such a small wish as the emperor? Then what's the point of being the emperor? This time, Gong Yimo did not withdraw her hand. Instead, she used her other hand to hold his somewhat cold hand. It's very meaningful. Although every kind of feeling is supreme, there is one thing that is above all feelings. What? Kim Yoon asked subconsciously. Gong Yimo smiled. Her smile was always so bright and beautiful. That pair of clear eyes seemed to contain everything in the world, including everything in the world. It's the throne. She said, you alone carry the hopes of all the people of Yuheng. Just this alone, can't it be above all feelings? She raised her eyebrows slightly. Her tone was faint and filled with endless yearning. Do you know how big this world is? She looked in a certain direction and gestured with her hands. If you keep going north from here, you will reach a world of ice and snow. The glacier will not melt all year round, and if you keep going south, you will encounter large expanses of blue ocean. There are fish in the North Sea. This has never been a myth. In Yuheng. I'm afraid not many people have seen the sea, right? When she said this, Kim Yoon seemed to have seen the sea from her eyes. He had never seen the sea before, but at this moment, his heart was surging with emotions. He suddenly wanted to see the legendary sea and see if it was as vast as her eyes. Also, on a faraway land, there are people with white skin. Their skin is as white as yours. They have blue and red eyes, and blonde and brown hair. And on another land, there are people with ink-like skin. They are born black. Isn't that amazing? Gong Yimo said softly, you are in your position, so you have to focus on your work. Do you think that it's enough just to make the people of Yuheng rich? People are not animals in captivity. Why can't they go out and see the world? And the force that supports them to leave their homeland and head towards the unknown is not themselves, but their country. So, you have so many things to do. Why do you want to sink into a person, a kind of feeling, a memory? The reason why an emperor is because his climb is endless. Gong Yimo smiled. If you become strong, you can go out to sea with me and see the world together. Why must we be husband and wife? Big brother Kim Yoon. Jin Yoon knew that she was only trying to comfort him, or perhaps she was rejecting him. However, she was right. After today, he could no longer do as he pleased. He had to shoulder a heavy responsibility, a very, very heavy responsibility. This was really painful. This was also reality. He looked at Gong Yimo. He did not have the power to open the sea and sky. What could he use to imprison a born eagle? Moreover, her world was much wider than he had imagined. Those white people, black people, the snow and the sea, everything that did not appear in his world existed in her world. This was the real reason. He could not leave everything behind and leave with her. So, he would never be able to enter her world. At this moment, someone announced that the auspicious hour had arrived. Kim Yoon should go out. He closed his eyes. Gong Yimo did not disturb him until he reached out his hand to her. Gong Yimo saw that he was smiling, but his smile looked like he was crying. There was an indescribable sadness. Once, I dreamed of holding your hand and walking to the throne with you. If we can't, I hope that the crown representing the Yuheng Emperor will be crowned by you. Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment, then she smiled. It's my honor. Chapter 381. The 4 countries sent their congratulations, and hundreds of officials knelt in welcome. Outside Yuheng's newly built Tianqi Hall, both sides of the 399 white jade steps were filled with people. This scene was grand, and it indicated that Yuheng had turned a new page. When Kim Yoon walked to the bottom of the jade steps, he felt his restless heart calm down. He felt everyone's gaze on him, and at that moment, he felt something in his heart. His world might not be as vast as Gong Yimo's, but his starting point was already very high. He had a lot, but he glanced at Gong Yimo, but he didn't have Gong Yimo. He couldn't keep her, he smiled. He also wanted to let go of everything and leave with Moa, but now, the path to Tianqi Hall was right in front of him, and he couldn't let go. So he brought Gong Yimo here. She had accompanied him through the most difficult times, and he hoped that this most glorious journey would also be with her. The appearance of the two immediately caused a huge uproar. There was no other reason, because at this time, even the Empress couldn't stand by his side. Immediately, a minister came forward to object. Your Majesty, this is not appropriate. She can't go up the white jade stage with you. Jin Yoon faintly glanced at him. In that instant, he understood what the Emperor's prestige was and what the Emperor's authority was. She is my coronator. Kim Yoon said this, and it was considered an explanation. That person was even more shocked. Wasn't the coronator already decided? Was it Grand Tutor Wu Jian? Grand Tutor Wu Jian had been a senior official for 3 dynasties, and only he had the qualifications. And this girl, if he wasn't wrong, this was Daiyu State's princess. What kind of scandal was this? This is not allowed. Your Majesty, please reconsider. As soon as he said this, all the ministers hurriedly shouted, Your Majesty, please reconsider. Kim Yoon held Gong Yimo's hand as they stood at the bottom of the white jade steps. Suddenly, he revealed a smile that Gong Yimo was familiar with. His smile contained confidence. The Kim Yoon who was originally only dazzling on the stage had come alive, he had completely transformed, becoming a stage anytime, anywhere. The humble and courteous second prince was not here. He was the Emperor of Yuheng and had his own edge. We have decided. It's her. It's her. This was a notice, not a question. This. The old official's eyes widened as he raised his head. Kim Yoon had already brought Gong Yimo up the white jade stairs. Kim Yoon's tough attitude was a clear indication of his determination. What could these old officials say, no matter how old they were? Thus, the officials no longer made a sound. They watched as this person, who did not belong to Yuheng, was pulled onto the high platform by the Emperor. What did it mean to be the center of attention? This was what it meant to be the center of attention. Gong Yimo could not get used to Kim Yoon's sudden change. She was pulled up high by him. At the top were the envoys from the 4 countries and the various kings. They watched as Kim Yoon forcefully brought a woman to accompany him on this heaven-like platform. This was an honor that even the Empress would not have, but when they saw who the woman was, they were strangely calm. The Dai State's envoy stood behind the pale-faced Gong Dai. He secretly thought to himself that their Dai State's princess was really shameless no matter where she went. Lu Yi's envoy was thinking that it was fortunate that the king did not come. Otherwise, he would definitely go berserk. As for Yu Qi's envoy, he was deep in thought. He glanced at Gong Yimo and revealed a scheming expression. But Kim Yoon did not notice any of this. He pulled Gong Yimo past all the envoys and walked up to the highest platform. At that place, other than the person holding the imperial crown, there was no one else who could stand there. That person was Imperial Tutor Wu Jian. At this moment, he had already retreated a stone's throw away. When he saw Kim Yoon come up, he quickly knelt down and raised the golden plate in his hands. That imperial crown was placed in front of Gong Yimo. "Princess, please crown His Highness." Imperial Tutor Wu Jian was an old man in his 70s. He could clearly see that today's crown was being crowned by Dai State's Jiyu country's princess. He was one of the earliest people to follow Kim Yoon. He knew how important Gong Yimo was in Kim Yoon's heart. It was no exaggeration to say that without Gong Yimo, there would be no Kim Yoon. Even Yu Heng's situation would change. Therefore, he knelt down because she deserved it. Wu Jian was definitely the authority in the hearts of all the old officials. They were still in a daze. But since Imperial Tutor Wu Jian had knelt down and willingly gave up the honor, what else could they say to make the new emperor unhappy? Therefore, they all knelt down and shouted in unison. "Princess, please crown His Highness. Princess, please crown His Highness." The shouts were deafening and could almost be heard in the entire Yuheng Imperial Palace. Gong Yimo turned around and saw hundreds of officials kneeling on both sides of the jade platform. When they knelt, the palace servants and guards all knelt down as well. Layer by layer, they were like dominoes that stretched out to the outside of the square. Their expressions could not be seen, but at this moment, their status was at her feet. So what if this was Yuheng? On the highest platform, Kim Yoon actually knelt down on one knee. He looked at Gong Yimo with a sincere expression. "Moa, please crown me." At this moment, the originally stunned Gong Yimo suddenly felt sour in her heart. Kim Yoon, he had completely placed her in the highest position, so much so that on this day, he was willing to lower his head and let her crown him. Now, in the entire Yuheng Imperial Palace, she was the only one standing. Today, Kim Yoon should be the most dazzling one, and this honor was given to her. Gong Yimo suppressed the surging emotions in her heart and personally removed the crown from Kim Yoon's head. She lifted the crown on the golden plate with both hands and held it high above Kim Yoon's head. "Yuheng's fourth emperor, Kim Yoon, please raise your head." According to convention, Gong Yimo could represent the heavens and make Kim Yoon swear 3 oaths. Therefore, her tone was solemn. When their eyes met, their hearts trembled. "First, I promise to devote my life to the people and grant Yuheng prosperity." "Yes." Kim Yoon closed his eyes and solemnly replied. Gong Yimo looked at him. At this moment, she actually felt that Kim Yoon was in pain. Why was he in pain? "Second, I promise to devote my life to peace and grant Yuheng 100 years of peace." Kim Yoon suddenly glanced at her and finally made this promise. "Yes." Gong Yimo smiled and gently tied the crown on his head. The 12 strings of beads at the front of the golden crown covered his excessively beautiful eyes. At this moment, in Gong Yimo's heart, Kim Yoon had already become the emperor. But in Kim Yoon's heart, he thought of the night she had left Yuheng, the night he had danced for her, the night she had tied the crown for him. Now that he thought about it, it was still vivid in his mind, but the reality seemed to be a lifetime ago. If he hadn't missed her back then and caught her a little earlier, would the ending have been different? At this moment, he heard Gong Yimo's gentle expectation. "Third, I promise to be happy." Kim Yoon suddenly looked at her. At this moment, the beads on his forehead collided, showing the turbulent emotions in his heart. Chapter 382. Gong Yimo said softly as she adjusted his crown. "In my opinion, there's nothing more important than your happiness. Kim Yoon Gij, can you promise me?" Kim Yoon's lips tightened, loosened, and tightened again. This moment was so unbearable. Finally, he took a deep breath, lowered his head, and responded with a single word. "Yes." Gong Yimo smiled and helped him up. The moment their hands clasped, it was like the scene in his dream, when Moa became his empress. But reality was so cruel that he had to recognize that this was only an ascension ceremony. He held Gong Yimo's hand tightly, unwilling to let go. Then, he led Gong Yimo to face the crowd. At that moment, Wu Jian kowtowed for the first time and said loudly, "Emperor ascending the throne, cheers." All the officials hurriedly kowtowed and cheered. "Long live," Wu Jian kowtowed again. "Cheers, long live." Cheers again. "Long live." Together, Gong Yimo could only hear the earth-shattering cheers. Cheers of "long live, long live, long live, long live, long live" resounded through the sky. This was the officials' most sincere wish for the new emperor. This moment was so emotional that Gong Yimo even had the illusion that the world was under her feet. This was royalty, this was the ruler. At this time, Kim Yoon stood beside her, looked at her, and whispered, "In this life, I can't keep you, but if one day you're tired of flying and want to turn back, I'll always be waiting for you in Yuheng." He pointed at the people prostrating below the stage and said in a deep voice, "These people, this Yuheng's empire, it belongs to me, but it also belongs to you." Gong Yimo raised her head in astonishment, but at this moment, she could no longer see Jin Yunju's eyes. She could only see him clenching her hand tightly. Finally, he clenched it very hard, then released it. Kim Yoon received the golden cup from Grand Tutor Wu Jian with both hands and held it up high as a sacrifice to heaven. "May Yuheng prosper and last for 100 generations. Long live, long live, long live." At that moment, he was the supreme emperor of the world. It was also his most glorious moment. At that moment, Gong Yimo was standing beside him, looking at him, but she was so close, yet so far away. At this moment, Gong Yimo felt a sudden pain in her heart. She looked down and saw Gong Ju standing in the middle of the noisy crowd, looking at her. No matter what time it was, he was always the center of attention. No matter where she stood, as long as she turned around, she would be able to see him. There were people in this world who were willing to conquer vast territories for you, and would also be willing to contribute these territories to you. In this world, there were also people who could give up the glory of being an emperor, give up their country, give up their beauties, and even give up their nature. They could suppress their desire to kill, all for you. It was Gong Dai. Gong Yimo's heart began to pound. She looked at him and suddenly smiled. In this kind of environment, no one knew who she was smiling at, but with her simple yellow dress and simple hairstyle, she gave people the feeling that her smile could topple city. A beautiful person didn't need too much embellishment or background. She herself was the best scenery in the world. When she was hidden, she was already beautiful. When she was revealed, she was unparalleled in the world. Grand Tutor Wu Jian, who had retreated off the stage, was also stunned by this smile. He suddenly understood why the young emperor found it difficult to let go of the princess of Dai Yu state. It was because, whether it was her talent or her own body, she could attract the world's attention and subdue millions of people. Gong Yimo, her name would be recorded in the history books along with Yuheng's new chapter. This was a glory that belonged to her alone. After the coronation ceremony, Gong Dai and Kim Yoon discussed the Three Kingdoms horse farm. With the Three Kingdoms renovating it at the same time, the horse farm would be built very quickly. The relay station on the horse farm was owned by Gong Yimo. Even if Kim Yoon didn't want Gong Yimo's money, Gong Dai still gave Kim Yoon the money needed to renovate the relay station. He also took out a blueprint and asked him to build it according to Gong Yimo's requirements. Kim Yoon looked at it and knew that the blueprint really did come from Gong Yimo. It was just a relay station, a temporary place to stay. Why did it have to be so unique? And every relay station was named Shungsha Relay Station. Since it had to be named, why didn't it have different names? At this time, the concept of a chain wasn't very strong, but if it was Gong Yimo's request, Kim Yoon would definitely do it. After the other details of the cooperation were settled, there wasn't much to say. Gong Dai directly said goodbye. Kim Yoon, who had already become emperor, wore a dragon robe and sat on the dragon throne. When he heard Gong Dai say that he was leaving, he suddenly put down the cinnabar pen in his hand and looked at Gong Dai. Gong Dai sat on a wooden armchair to the side. Although he was older than Gong Dai by a few years, Gong Dai's calm and collected aura wasn't any worse than him, the emperor. Kim Yoon even saw Mo-er's figure in him. Gong Dai. He really loved Mo-er. When one loved someone to the extreme, they would intentionally learn everything about her. Even someone as strong as Gong Dai couldn't escape this rule. You're leaving? Kim Yoon was rather reluctant. Of course, it wasn't that he was reluctant to part with Gong Dai. Gong Dai's slightly cold ink-black eyes glanced at Kim Yoon. The matter is over. Emperor Yuheng, is there anything else? He had already found out from the royal sister that she and Kim Yoon had made things clear. So even if he didn't like Kim Yoon, Gong Dai still sat here with a rare good tone. Kim Yoon sighed. That's right. Could he keep her? He laughed bitterly. Gong Dai, you really like Mo-er, don't you? Gong Dai's fingertips gently rubbed the edge of the blue and white porcelain cup. He spoke in a very cold and direct tone. Yes, I love her very much. Kim Yoon didn't expect that a person as cold as Gong Dai would speak of the word love without any hesitation. No wonder Mo-er treated him differently. A trace of bitterness appeared on his face. He laughed bitterly. That's good. Mo-er, she also chose you. Even if you have that kind of status, sometimes I feel that you have it even harder than me. For today's outcome, you must have sacrificed a lot. His expression turned serious. But you're still too young. The world is full of flowers that gradually confuse people's eyes. If one day you let Mo-er down, I will definitely not let you off. Even if you die, that day won't come. Gong Dai stared at him. His cold voice was laced with murderous intent. Every time someone tried to provoke his reverse scale, he would reveal such a ferocious gaze. He looked at them as if they were dead object. For a moment, Kim Yoon couldn't breathe under his gaze. Then, he felt a little angry. He felt that Gong Dai was looking down on him too much. Gong Dai had already stood up. You'll never know what I can do for her. Your worries are unnecessary. Gong Dai sneered. Tomorrow, this prince will leave with royal sister. Emperor Yuheng is busy, so please don't send me off. After he finished speaking, he turned and left. Kim Yoon was so angry that he slapped away the documents on the table. His chest heaved up and down as he gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, Gong Dai, you better do what you say. Chapter 383. Gong Yimo saw that Kim Yoon did not want to see her off. She thought that perhaps he was afraid of being reminded of the past, so she did not say much. After bidding farewell to him, she left the Yuheng Imperial Palace. Kim Yoon stood in the study, watching Gong Yimo bid farewell and leave. Her expression was free and at ease. Perhaps there was some reluctance, but not to the extent that she was reluctant to part with him. The world was very big, so big that the separation between people could be eternal. Therefore, the most moving poems would always be farewell poems, and the most heart-wrenching feelings were all unattainable. Take care, Mo-er. As long as I live, I will wait for you in Yuheng. Gong Yimo was originally feeling a little down. Kim Yoon was really a very good person, but in this era, it was really too difficult to see him. Perhaps the next time they met, he would already have a wife and children, and would have forgotten her. Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo was not in high spirits, and frowned slightly. He urged his horse forward, and said something that she might be interested in. Royal sister, this is the former snow country. Do you want to see the treasure that the Empress Yuheng mentioned? Gong Yimo was taken aback, and then smiled. They said it was a treasure. How could it be so easy to find it? If the Snow Clan found it, they would not say it. Perhaps they themselves do not know where it is, so how can we find it? Gong Dai naturally understood this. He rode on his horse, looking at the horizon in the distance, and suddenly asked softly, Royal sister, in this world, do you really think there is a secret technique that can let people borrow a corpse to return their soul? Gong Yimo was shocked, and could not help but look at Gong Dai. She saw that he seemed to be speaking casually, and had a very casual expression. Gong Yimo suppressed her heartbeat, and said calmly, How can that be? The secret technique of using a corpse to return one's soul must be a lie. Even if there really is someone who can use a corpse to return their soul, it is definitely a coincidence. The secret technique does not exist. Gong Yimo was very sure that the world she was in was very real. From the Han Dynasty to the present, it was a different time and space of Earth. Perhaps it was related to the theory of parallel space, but there was no such thing as ghosts and gods. And perhaps she accidentally encountered a time and space crack, and her body mutated, so she could break the time and space barrier again and again. But Gong Dai only heard one sentence, and that was what the royal sister said: if there really was someone who could use a corpse to return their soul, it must be a coincidence. His heart was pounding. If there really was someone who could use a corpse to return to life, then would that person be the royal sister? This could explain why she to the present, of course, the things that she did not to the present, until now, she to the present, to the things she do not to the things that she did. Perhaps thinking deeper, she was an otherworldly person who suddenly appeared in this body. Would there be a day when she would leave this body, and he would not know? No, what was he thinking? Gong Dai pursed his lips tightly, and at this moment, Gong Yimo suddenly pointed at the city wall in front of them and smiled. Gong Dai, we have arrived at Wancheng. Gong Dai regained his senses and looked. Indeed, it was Wancheng. Last time, he caught the royal sister here, and the royal sister also activated the 6th stage of martial arts, unity of heaven and man here. Gong Yimo's feelings towards Wancheng were very complicated, because the last time she was here, in that dilapidated temple, she seemed to have seen her appearance before she died in her previous life. But this time, her heart was much calmer, and she wanted to bring Gong Dai to take a look. After entering the city, such a large group of people would be very eye-catching. After Gong Yimo brought Gong Dai to eat something, the others found an inn to settle down, and she brought Gong Dai to the dilapidated temple. The scenery along the way was the same, but the refugees at the dilapidated temple were gone. Now that Dai Yu state was peaceful, it was a good time for development. As long as one was willing to work, one would not starve to death. So in the past, most of the refugees here learned how to swim, and then went to work on boats. But this dilapidated temple was still there. It had witnessed the coming and going of so many people, and it had remained standing. When Gong Dai walked in, he had a bad feeling. Ever since he touched the black stone that was the royal sister, there seemed to be an additional connection between him and the royal sister, but he did not mention this matter. When Gong Yimo walked in, she realized that this place had not changed at all, but the people here had changed. She never thought that one day, she would come here with Gong Dai. And today, she did not have any other intentions, she just wanted to bring Gong Dai to pay her respects. In her heart, she actually wanted to let go of the memory of being tortured and killed, and really give Gong Dai a chance. But for no reason, she really could not let go of the knot in her heart, and she felt that she might gain something by coming here to take a look. Coming here during the day, it felt very quiet. The sunlight shone in through the hole in the window, and they could even see the rising smoke. Gong Yimo looked at the benevolent-looking bodhisattva above, and pulled Gong Dai to kneel down and pay her respects. Bodhisattva, oh Bodhisattva, please give me some guidance. What should I do? After Gong Yimo thought to herself, she felt that she was ridiculous. She, a person who did not believe in ghosts and gods, actually came here to pay her respects to Bodhisattva for some personal feelings. Meanwhile, Gong Dai felt that the strange feeling was getting stronger and stronger. He raised his head to look at Bodhisattva's face, and only felt that that smile seemed more like a sneer. Gong Dai, let's go. After paying her respects, Gong Yimo felt a little better, and she turned her head to pull Gong Dai and prepared to leave. But who knew that when she turned her head, she would actually scream and retreat. Gong Dai was frightened by her scream, and he quickly came over to pull her, but Gong Yimo actually slapped his hand away with a very frightened expression. Feeling the slapping on his hand, Gong Dai looked at Gong Yimo strangely, not understanding what was going on. Royal sister, what's wrong with you? I'm Gong Dai, he suddenly shouted in a very loud voice, and only then did Gong Yimo wake up from her dream. She patted her face and realized that it was really Gong Dai, but at this moment, her heart was beating very fast, and there seemed to be cold sweat on her forehead, which made Gong Dai even more uneasy. What's wrong? Gong Dai asked softly, afraid that he would provoke her sensitive nerves. Gong Yimo smiled with a pale face. Nothing, maybe I've been too tired recently, and actually started hallucinating. Wasn't it just a hallucination? When she turned her head just now, the person she saw was not the current Gong Dai, but the regent from her previous life who sneered and broke her finger. The feeling just now was too real. When he turned his head and sneered at her, it was as if she had returned to the death row in an instant. Gong Yimo touched the stone at her waist. It seemed that this thing might still affect her. It might be useful, but it seemed to be more harmful. However, she looked at Bodhisattva strangely, and her heart was suspicious. Was there something wrong with this run-down temple? She stared up and suddenly felt that the cinnabar mole between Bodhisattva's eyebrows seemed a little strange. Chapter 384. Why was it strange? Because the Bodhisattva had been in disrepair for a long time, the paint on her body had faded. However, the cinnabar between her eyebrows was still very bright, like a bead embedded in it. After Gong Yimo felt a little better, she inexplicably went forward, climbed up the lotus seat, and reached out to touch the protrusion. Gong Dai, who was standing below, was still a little confused. He always felt that Royal Sister was avoiding him, so she turned to look at the Bodhisattva. But why? He clearly did not do anything, so why was Royal Sister sometimes afraid of him? He only wanted to love her. Gong Yimo's heart was pounding, not because of the Bodhisattva in front of her, but because the illusion just now was too terrifying. She did not know how to face Gong Dai. At this moment, she hoped that Gong Dai would stay as far away from her as possible. In this moment of absent-mindedness, she reached out to touch the cinnabar between the Bodhisattva's eyebrows. As a result, something strange happened. Be careful. Gong Dai immediately flew forward to catch Gong Yimo, but it was too late. The two of them fell into the tunnel together, and as soon as they fell, the Bodhisattva rose up again. It looked as if no one had been here before. The two of them fell vertically at first, then finally landed on a slope and rolled down. Gong Dai quickly used his body to protect Gong Yimo, and Gong Yimo was one step faster to protect his head. As a result, the two of them did not suffer any injuries after falling down. Are you okay? Gong Yimo quickly asked. There were many strange protrusions along the way, and Gong Dai must have suffered a lot of internal injuries in order to protect her. I'm fine. In the darkness, Gong Dai quietly glanced at Gong Yimo. Although he could not see clearly, her bright eyes proved that she was not injured. This made Gong Dai slightly relieved, and he was a little reluctant to let go of her. However, Gong Yimo wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. She let go of Gong Dai and stood up. Then, she took out a flashlight from the space. She had never used this thing before, but she didn't expect it to come in handy today. The sudden light made Gong Dai panic for a moment. He didn't feel it when he was young, but now, the more he saw Gong Yimo take out something that didn't belong to this era, the more nervous he became. It was as if he couldn't keep her at all. Therefore, Gong Dai held Gong Yimo's hand tightly. The two of them observed their surroundings for a while and decided to move forward. This dark passageway seemed to have been built for a very long time. Gong Yimo sighed. Don't tell me you're right and we've fallen into some kind of treasure. Because they had fallen vertically, it was impossible for them to go back the way they came, and the future was unknown. Gong Yimo sighed at her bad luck and joked with Gong Dai again. Gong Dai closed his eyes and felt for a moment. There's wind. We can go out. After he said that, Gong Yimo felt a lot more at ease. Gong Dai was still calm. He wasn't afraid at all. She was a little afraid of this kind of claustrophobic space. This tunnel seemed to have no end. The stone walls were slippery, as if they had been smeared with some kind of black mucus. Therefore, Gong Yimo felt disgusted and stopped moving after touching it. Why did this damn place look so creepy? Maybe it was someone's tomb? An underground palace? She didn't have any intention of robbing a tomb. Suddenly, she slipped and was supported by Gong Dai. Be careful. Gong Yimo looked and saw that the ground was also covered with that kind of strange black mucus. She felt a little disgusted, but she still forced a smile and said, It's okay. This place has been sealed for a long time. There's no one here. I'm not afraid. Gong Dai said softly, This place is a little strange. Look, there are no plants here. It's so strange. It's better to be careful. When he said that, Gong Yimo suddenly felt a chill down her spine. Then, she shone her flashlight repeatedly and found that there were really no plants. There wasn't even moss. This didn't make sense. Could it be that the black mucus was causing trouble? It was very quiet underground. Originally, Gong Yimo only thought of this place as an ordinary underground palace. However, after hearing Gong Dai's words, she suddenly felt a chill down her spine. At this moment, her light beam suddenly swept over something. Gong Yimo was shocked. It looked like a person. Gong Dai quickly protected Gong Yimo behind him and pulled her forward. It really was a person. But to be precise, it was a dried corpse. Gong Yimo wanted to look, but Gong Dai covered her eyes. Don't look. What's wrong? Gong Ju was shocked by the seriousness in Gong Ju's tone. It's just a dried corpse. Maybe this is an underground palace, and this person was buried with a slave. She didn't want to think too much about this matter. Gong Dai carefully looked at the dried corpse, and then pulled Gong Yimo forward. We didn't accidentally enter the tomb. As they walked, Gong Dai pulled her tightly and said, "Rumor has it that the people of Snow Country have a lot of witchcraft rituals. This place is most likely an abandoned ritual ground. Just like that person just now. Before he died, his heart was dug out while he was still alive. Even after becoming a dried corpse, his ferocious expression was still clearly visible. So, he didn't want Gong Yimo to look. He was afraid that she would feel uncomfortable." When he said that, Gong Yimo's expression became serious. However, after thinking about it, no one knew how many years it had been since someone came here. Even if something terrible happened here, what did it matter? Could there be ghosts? Suddenly, Gong Yimo stopped abruptly. Gong Dai looked back at her. What's wrong? Because the flashlight was shining in front, he didn't notice how pale Gong Yimo's face was. I'm fine, Gong Yimo said after a while. Could she say that she felt as if a small hand had patted her ankle just now? It was probably an illusion, she thought. The two of them continued to walk forward. On the way, they met a few dried corpses, but Gong Dai didn't let her see them. So, Gong Yimo only knew that these corpses had their hearts dug out while they were still alive. After walking through the passageway, they came to a large stone room. It was still very simple. There were only 6 stone platforms, facing the center, arranged in the shape of a sun. On each platform, there was a person lying, and they were all dried corpses. This passageway was very strange. Why didn't these corpses rot but were only dehydrated? This time, Gong Dai couldn't block Gong Yimo's view. She found that these people were all tied to the stone platforms. Moreover, everyone's upper body was cut open by a blade. It was just that the position of the cut was different. Gong Yimo clicked her tongue. It's so scary to be uncivilized. Fortunately, I didn't grow up in Snow Country, thinking that if Snow Country was still here, and her cheap father was the king of the Snow Country, she didn't know what strange things she would be forced to do. Chapter 385. Ignoring Gong Dai's attempts to stop her, Gong Yimo went forward to take a look. She realized that these people had indeed died very miserably, so she did not look at their faces. Instead, she took out a dagger and poked at the part of their body that was cut open to see the reason why it was cut open. Seeing Gong Yimo touch the corpse, Gong Dai could not bear for her to do it, so he took the dagger from her hand and said, "Royal sister, what do you want to see? Let me do it." His actions made Gong Yimo feel very warm. She said softly, "I just want to see what is missing." Gong Dai flipped open his abdomen. When he was young, Gong Yimo had drawn a detailed diagram of the human body for him. Later on, in Zhao prison, he had also experimented on those corpses, so he had a certain understanding of the human body. His missing a stomach. Although there was only a flashlight, Gong Dai was still very certain. Then he walked to the next corpse and casually flipped through it. He doesn't have guts. Gong Yimo thought about it. In the end, after a round of examination, she realized that they were missing a stomach, gallbladder, small intestine, large intestine, bladder, and 3 cavities. Missing 6 organs. Gong Yimo suddenly felt that she was rather bored. Instead of finding a way out, she was actually flipping through the dried corpses left behind by the previous sacrifices. It was just a foolish folklore. Snow Country was already destroyed, what was there to look into? Then they continued to walk forward. There was another long and narrow corridor, and then they arrived at another stone room. In the process, the number of corpses on the ground increased, but without exception, all of them had their hearts dug out. This stone room was the same as the previous one, except that the 6 stone platforms had turned into 5, and the people on the platforms had also taken out something with a knife on their upper body. Gong Yimo said, "There's no need to look. The person in the stone room just now was missing 6 organs. This stone room has 5 stone platforms, so what's missing must be the 5 organs. I don't know why they killed these people, and even dug out their hearts." Who? As Gong Yimo was speaking, a small black shadow suddenly jumped under the light of the flashlight. Gong Yimo said hurriedly, but she couldn't see anything when she looked over. It was really strange. Seeing that she was nervous, Gong Dai also sank his qi into his dantian to sense carefully. There was no third person's aura here. Royal sister, what's wrong? Gong Dai felt that something was wrong with Gong Yimo recently. There's no third person here. On the way here, he had carefully observed the surroundings. Other than them, there were no other traces of outsiders. Gong Yimo also felt that her eyes were playing tricks on her. She pointed at the stone on her waist in annoyance. Maybe this damn thing is affecting me. I have to throw it away when I get out. Gong Dai felt that it wasn't just that, but they were underground now, so it wasn't appropriate for them to talk about this. Then let's talk about it outside. He patted Gong Yimo's head comfortingly and pulled her forward. The underground air was circulating, which meant that there must be an exit. He didn't want to stay underground for too long in case of accidents. After passing through another tunnel, they arrived at another stone room. However, this stone room was different. There were more than 20 people kneeling on the ground. They were all kneeling with their heads lowered and their hands crossed in front of their chests. When they first came in, Gong Yimo was shocked. She was afraid that when the light shone on them, they would all turn their heads. This place is too strange. The temperature is very low, but it shouldn't be to the extent of turning into dried corpses, right? Moreover, their clothes were all in good condition. The preservation was done well. Gong Dai saw that Gong Yimo was intentionally hiding behind him and couldn't help but smile dotingly. Maybe it's because of the black liquid that there's no life here. No life, no plants, no animals, not even microbes. Gong Yimo nodded. However, looking at the pile of dried corpses on the ground with their backs facing them, she still couldn't accept it. What are they doing? Gong Dai saw that there was an exquisitely carved stone seat in front of them. In front of the stone seat was a large cauldron, and these people seemed to be devoutly welcoming someone, maintaining their kneeling posture even after death. Gong Ju gently pulled her by the hand and led her to the stone seat. When they passed by the large cauldron, Gong Yimo glanced at it and almost vomited. She was wondering where the hearts that were dug out went. She didn't expect that they were all soaked in here. In the black viscous water, the hearts didn't dry up. That was amazing. From the position of the stone seat, they could see the faces of the dried corpses. Although it wasn't very clear, they didn't seem to be struggling. All of them had their heads lowered and looked at the ground, as if they were willing to die. Without exception, all of them had sacrificed their hearts. At this moment, Gong Yimo discovered something and exclaimed, "Gong Dai, there are words behind the stone seat." Gong Dai walked over to take a look and discovered that the words were unique to the Snow Country. Fortunately, Gong Dai had a photographic memory and actually knew what was written here. So this is really the place where the Snow Country sacrificed. Gong Dai saw something and narrowed his eyes, but he still explained in a soft voice. When the Snow Country was destroyed, the remaining Snow Clan people harbored hatred in their hearts, so they wanted to use the secret method of reincarnation to summon the evil spirit and slaughter the country and the world. Gong Yimo couldn't help but frown when she heard this. These people are really... I don't understand their thoughts. Could it be that they killed so many people for such a non-existent matter? Slaughter the country and the world, their imagination is quite rich. They don't want others to have a good life because they don't want others to have a good life. Gong Dai did not speak. His fingertips moved down, wiping away the dust, and continued to look at the words behind and said softly, What you think is a non-existent matter, these remaining Snow Country people have been preparing for nearly 4 years. The people who died were not all from the Snow Clan. At least in the corridor just now, those people were selected by a secret method as living sacrifices. Only the people in this stone room are the ones that the Snow Clan is willing to sacrifice. Gong Yimo was even more depressed. The country has been destroyed for 4 years. In such a long time, instead of thinking about being down-to-earth and good people, they killed so many people to complete a meaningless sacrifice. So, the destruction of the Snow Country is not without reason. In her view, this was simply a lack of intelligence, but counting the time, so much time had passed. It had nothing to do with her. Let's go. Anyway, there are no treasures here. Let's get out of here quickly. It's too depressing to stay here. Gong Dai nodded and was ready to take her away. But at this time, the flashlight swept across. Gong Yimo's expression suddenly became serious. This time, she was sure that she was not hallucinating. Gong Dai. Gong Yimo pointed at the group of corpses kneeling on the ground and said slowly and seriously, "Look at that person." When we came in, everyone was kneeling with their heads down. Why is he raising his head? Gong Dai also remembered this, so he pulled out his sword and said to Gong Yimo, "Don't be afraid, let's continue." Gong Yimo frowned and looked at the corpse that raised his head. Because it was just a quick glance, she did not see anything at the back of his head. It was black and very strange. Chapter 386. When they finally reached the end, there was no path in front of them. This didn't make sense. They were clearly breathing smoothly. Gong Yimo suddenly thought of something. She lowered her head and shone the flashlight on her ankle. It was fine if she didn't shine it, but when she did, her heart skipped a beat. What's wrong? Gong Dai's voice echoed in the space. It was already cold, but now it sounded even colder. Gong Yimo took a deep breath and said seriously, "When I was walking in the corridor, I stopped for a moment. Do you remember?" Gong Dai frowned slightly as he thought of her strange behavior. "At that time, I stopped because I felt a small hand patting my ankle." Gong Dai heard this and looked at the direction of her flashlight. He saw a small black handprint on her long clothes. There was a small thing. Its hand might have touched the black mucus on the wall and imprinted on her clothes. At this moment, the two of them didn't speak. Gong Dai suddenly said, "Don't be afraid. It should be a living thing." Gong Yimo nodded solemnly. "If it is, then we should be able to get out by following it. There was nothing in this space, so that thing should be where they came from." The two of them continued to walk back. Gong Dai thought that she was afraid and held her hand tightly. Who knew that? Gong Yimo said angrily. "The Shui people are really bored. They spent so many years to create this place, and I don't know what kind of monster they created." Gong Dai said, "We will get out. Don't be afraid." "Of course we have to get out." Gong Yimo rolled her eyes and deliberately said loudly, "If we can't find the exit, I will blow up this place. There is no value in keeping it anyway." When she said that, she suddenly felt a chill on her back. Gong Dai's reaction was faster than her. There was a sharp cry. He suddenly reached out and grabbed that thing. It was trying to sneak an attack on Gong Yimo, but how could it be a match for Gong Dai? Therefore, with Gong Dai around, she would feel safe wherever she went. Gong Yimo sighed in her heart. She looked at the furry thing in his hand and found it hard to accept. She took a closer look and realized that it was actually a monkey. At this moment, it was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. Without thinking, it tried to scratch Gong Dai's arm with its little claws, but how could Gong Dai let it succeed? He exerted force in his hand. Its claws were pulled down and it let out a weak whimper. "Why is there a monkey here?" Gong Yimo was stunned. Could it be that the people of Snow Country spent 4 years and sacrificed hundreds of people just to summon a monkey? Why did she suddenly feel like the terrifying atmosphere was swept away, and she even felt like laughing? Even if the monkey's eyes were red, it didn't look like it could destroy the world, right? Ha 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 ha. Although she laughed, she still hurriedly took out a rope from her space and tied it around its neck. At this time, Gong Dai's eyes flashed with an ominous light. He stared at the monkey and coldly said, "Take us out, or else, I'll kill you." The monkey had just regained its freedom and was threatened and trapped. It first tried to grab the rope, but when it realized that it had broken, it looked at Gong Dai with a very human-like gaze. Finally, it squeaked a few times and signaled for Gong Dai to follow it. Gong Yimo wasn't afraid of a monkey lying. The two of them followed it, only to see it reach the place with the giant cauldron and the stone pedestal. It pointed at the giant cauldron and kept repeating the action of eat. Gong Yimo was disgusted. It wants us to eat people's hearts. The people's hearts in the cauldron can't all be its food. Thinking of this, she used a dagger to lightly poke the little monkey's body and fiercely said, "We don't eat this plaything, don't play tricks. Quickly take us out, now." At this moment, Gong Yimo actually saw a trace of human-like ridicule in the monkey's eyes. It suddenly slapped the cauldron's body twice, causing Gong Yimo to lose her footing and fall down again. Gong Dai held onto her tightly, while she held onto the monkey with one hand. The moment she fell, she was surrounded by water. There was a lake, and the water was flowing. It meant that there was an exit. As the flashlight was waterproof, she could see the monkey struggling in the water under the light of the flashlight. But at the same time, she also saw many fish. Many of them were white and spindle-shaped. There were so many that it made one's scalp tingle. She didn't have time to see what kind of fish it was before Gongju grabbed her and dragged her out. At the same time, she smelled the scent of blood. "This fish is fishy." Hearing Gong Dai say that, Gong Yimo was shocked. She turned around and saw a fish only a palm's distance away from her eyes. Gong Yimo could clearly see the sharp teeth in its mouth. It was a piranha. These fish were afraid of sunlight, so they only lived in the dark underground. If they fell down like this, wouldn't they be adding to the fish's meal? Fortunately, Gong Dai had transformed his internal energy the moment he was bitten. He also hugged Gong Yimo in his arms to protect her. Otherwise, she would have been bitten by these fish the moment she fell down. However, the transformation of internal energy didn't take long. They had to get out of danger as soon as possible. At this moment, Gong Yimo suddenly saw that none of the piranha around the monkey attacked it. She suddenly had an absurd idea. Could it be that only by eating the human heart in the cauldron would one be able to avoid the piranha's attacks? Was that why the monkey let them eat it just now? While she was hesitating, Gong Dai had already swum for a long time with her in his arms. The fish were clustered around them and didn't disperse. Even the flashlight's light couldn't shine out. However, whenever they bit over, they would be repelled by Gong Dai's internal energy. Although he wasn't injured for the time being, this was very strenuous for Gong Dai. "We must find a solution." Gong Yimo's eyes were sharp. She pulled the little monkey over and quickly made a cut on his hand. A strange thing happened. The monkey was originally gloating, but when it was injured, it let out a strange cry. The moment the trace of black blood floated in the water, the area within a radius of 1 or 2 meters immediately became a vacuum. Not a single piranha dared to approach. The little monkey screamed in anger, but its injured hand was held tightly by Gong Yimo. She used its blood to open a path and swam outside. Gong Yimo was right. If eating the human heart in the cauldron could restrain the piranha, then the little monkey must have eaten a lot. Sure enough, its blood was the bane of the piranha, allowing them to breathe. "Let's go," Gong Dai said in a deep voice. The two of them used the monkey's blood to open a path and swam outside. The piranha followed closely behind, but they didn't dare to get too close. They always kept a distance of 2 meters. They didn't know how long they swam. Finally, when a beam of light appeared, all the piranha turned back. They finally got out of that broken place. Chapter 387. As soon as Gong Yimo climbed onto the shore, she lay on the ground with her arms and legs spread out. That little monkey also lay half dead at her feet due to excessive blood loss. When they entered, it was morning. When they came out, it was already evening. Damn it, they were really unlucky. They actually unintentionally went to such an unlucky place and wasted an entire day. Although there was nothing inside, Gong Yimo still felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. That rundown temple was the place where her soul returned to in her previous life, and below it was the sacrificial altar of hundreds of people. When she thought about it, it was really unbelievable. If it wasn't for the fact that she didn't believe in ghosts and gods, she would feel that this coincidence was a little too much. Moreover, there were also the words behind the stone pedestal. Gong Dai said that after Shui country was destroyed, they used 4 years to prepare this underground sacrificial ceremony. From the time Shui country was destroyed to when she transmigrated, it was also exactly 4 years. Gong Yimo felt that she was really possessed. Why was she thinking about such nonsense? She patted her forehead in annoyance. At this moment, Gong Dai sat beside her. After resting for a while, Gong Yimo raised her head and saw that there were many wounds on his body. They were all bitten when he protected her from those white piranhas. Gong Yimo felt a little heartache and blamed herself. "I'm sorry. If I didn't accidentally barge into that damned place, you wouldn't be injured." Gong Dai was currently treating the wounds on his body. He didn't care about these wounds at all. The blood that flowed out was red and didn't feel numb or itchy. Obviously, it wasn't poisonous. "It's okay. It's just a superficial wound." As he said this, he tore off a piece of cloth and used his teeth and left hand to tie up the wound on his right hand. His movements were neat, but a cold light flashed in his eyes. "I didn't expect that there would be such fish in Dayu State. Tomorrow, I'll get the local governor to think of a way to get rid of this school of fish. Also, that run-down temple can't be left there anymore." Gong Dai wanted to tear down the temple. For some reason, Gong Yimo felt both melancholy and relief. In the end, she opened her mouth but did not say a word. She felt melancholy because that was the place where her soul had returned to in her previous life. She felt relieved because if that broken plane didn't exist in this life, did it mean that she wouldn't repeat the mistakes of her previous life? In her previous life, Gong Dai killed her in the ruined temple. In this life, he demolished the ruined temple for her. It was as if it was destined. This mysterious feeling made Gong Yimo fall into a daze again. Seeing her in such a state, Gong Ju reached out and removed the stone from her waist. "What's wrong?" Gong Yimo was surprised. She found that the first thing she wanted to do was to snatch back that strange stone. "This thing is too strange. Don't carry it with you anymore." As he spoke, he actually flipped his hand and threw the stone into the lake behind him. At this moment, Monkey, who had caught his breath, looked at the lake weakly and closed his eyes again. Seeing Gong Dai throw the stone away like this, Gong Yimo actually felt sad. What was going on? Why did she want that stone so much? Just like now, she couldn't wait to jump down and pick it up. No. This wasn't what she was thinking. It seemed like Gong Dai was right. There was indeed something wrong with that stone. It actually affected her thoughts unknowingly. It was also good that it sank into the water. At least there were only fishes in the water. There was no need to worry about it harming anyone. Without that stone, although Gong Yimo felt uncomfortable in her heart because its characteristics indicated that it would be very useful, she still felt physically relaxed. She saw that Gong Dai was treating his wounds again. However, it was a little inconvenient on his back. Gong Yimo hurriedly went forward to take over. Gong Yimo wanted to apply medicine for him. Gong Dai definitely wouldn't refuse. Although it was only a superficial wound, he didn't really mind. However, Gong Yimo was different. She gently stroked his back with her fingers. Her eyes darkened as she spoke softly. "Sigh. I seem to always cause you to get hurt." Gong Dai was stunned for a moment before he smiled. "This is nothing. This small injury, compared to the arrow that she had blocked for her, was it really nothing?" However, Gong Yimo thought of the past. It seemed that every time Gong Dai got hurt, it was related to her. Thinking of this, she applied the medicine even more gently, as if she was afraid of hurting him. Those piranhas' mouths were very small, so the wounds left behind weren't deep. It would be fine after a simple treatment. The wind blew gently. Everything that happened underground was like a dream. Other than the missing stone, there was also the additional monkey beside her feet. After applying the medicine, Gong Yimo looked at the sleeping monkey beside her feet. She rubbed her chin and smiled. "Gong Dai, what do you think we should do with this monkey? It looks like it's about to die. Why don't we roast monkey meat for dinner?" She had said that on purpose. The monkey quickly sat up. What surprised Gong Yimo was that animals that grew up in that kind of place didn't look strange at all. With its black and grey fur and small round head, it actually gave off a cute feeling. When it heard Gong Yimo say that she wanted to eat it, it squeaked twice in protest. Gong Dai could see that Gong Yimo didn't want to kill it. However, it was too dangerous to not kill something that came from that kind of place. Therefore, after taking the clothes that Gong Yimo gave him, he calmly changed his clothes in front of Gong Yimo as he spoke softly. "Let's just kill it." His tone was very serious. When the monkey heard Gong Dai's words, it shuddered. It quickly jumped up and hid behind Gong Yimo. It didn't look weak from losing too much blood at all. It felt that Gong Yimo didn't really want to kill it, but Gong Dai wasn't joking. Gong Yimo was a little surprised. She smiled and said vaguely, "It's better to keep such a smart little guy. If there's really a problem, it won't be too late to kill it." Since Gong Yimo said so, Gong Dai could only agree. However, his gaze fell on the monkey a few times, making its hair stand on end. In the end, it lay on Gong Yimo's back and played dead. Late at night, Gong Yimo was lying on the bed, unable to sleep. The monkey was tied to the leg of the table outside. Moreover, Gong Dai had tied it with a metal chain the moment he returned to the city. No matter how smart it was, it couldn't do anything. Only then did he feel assured that Gong Yimo would raise such a dangerous thing. A light flashed in Gong Yimo's eyes. In the end, she actually let go of the monkey's ankles. The monkey was originally sleeping, but when it saw her like this, it actually raised its head to look at her. At that moment, Gong Yimo's expression was a little strange. "I know you can understand me." Gong Yimo looked at the little monkey and said with some difficulty, "You can swim too. How about this? As long as you can pick up the stone that was thrown into the lake, I'll take you to Daiyu State and let you live a good life." The monkey seemed to be intelligent. It glanced at her and left. Gong Yimo lay back on the bed again. This time, she fell asleep very quickly. Chapter 388. The next day, when Gong Yimo woke up, she felt very energetic. She looked up and saw that the monkey was lying on her bed. She was shocked and quickly sat up. She realized that the chains on the monkey's legs had been loosened. The monkey's body was wet and there was something under it. Gong Yimo frowned and pulled out the object. She was surprised to find that it was the stone that should have been lying at the bottom of the lake. In order to make it easier to fix, Gong Yimo used a yellow ribbon to wrap it around her waist. Now, it was back. And it was obviously brought back by the monkey. At that moment, she looked at the little monkey and her eyes flashed with killing intent. But then she thought, if it was really the monkey's doing, then who was the one who unlocked the chains? Even if the monkey was intelligent, how could it open without a key? And the key, she touched her pillow. Sure enough, it was still under her pillow. What a ghost. The best way to deal with this was to kill the monkey and then destroy the rock. Prevention is better than cure. She had once read in a book that there was a type of metal that contained radioactive substances. If it was worn for a long time, it would cause mental confusion. If she guessed correctly, this stone was made of that material. But thinking about it, this stone was given to her by the Shui clan. Why would they want to harm her? Was there a conspiracy? Thinking about the hundreds of dried corpses she saw yesterday, Gong Yimo gradually had an idea. She decided to go back to Daiyu State and hide this stone. Then she would replace it with a fake one. She wanted to see what the Shui clan wanted to do. As for the monkey, Gong Yimo thought about it and decided to let it go for now. It was just a monkey. What did it matter? But Gong Yimo did not tell Gong Dai all this because she was afraid that he would be worried. Soon, they arrived at Daiyu State. Gong Yimo was very happy to be back this time. Daiyu State was her home. She was finally back. The citizens immediately noticed Gong Yimo. From the moment she entered, everyone lined the streets to welcome her. Their princess had returned. Since the commoners were so lively, the officials and nobles in the capital naturally received the news immediately. The emperor was very happy because Gong Yimo had come back this time. She must have solved the matter of the Three Kingdoms horse farm. But he didn't know why he was gone for so long. At the entrance of the palace, Gong Yimo saw the emperor waiting for her from afar. Her eyes lit up and she hurriedly ran over. She didn't salute and just pulled Gong Cheng and said coquettishly, "Imperial Father, are you waiting for me here because you missed me?" Her straightforward words made Gong Cheng very uncomfortable, and the smile on his face froze. "You little girl, what are you saying? You're already an adult, yet you're not ashamed at all." But in his heart, he was gratified. After not seeing each other for so long, Gong Yimo was not estranged from him. Gong Yimo pouted and mumbled, "That's because Imperial Father spoiled him." "You." Gong Cheng smiled and patted her head. At this time, Gong Che looked at Gong Yimo in a daze. After not seeing her for so long, he really missed her. "Moa," he said with some grievance, "when you came back this time, you actually only saw Imperial Father and not Imperial Brother." Gong Yimo blinked and looked at him. "How could that be? Big Brother Crown Prince, I haven't seen you for a while. How did you become more handsome? The girls in the capital, I'm afraid they can't walk when they see you." Gong Cheng pretended to be angry. "Your mouth is getting more and more careless. Why aren't you going in? How shameful." Gong Yimo made a face at Gong Cheng. She was not afraid of him at all. Hearing her words, she quickly sat on her palanquin. Gong Dai also dismounted and saluted Gong Cheng, coldly reporting the progress. Seeing that the two children were so efficient, Gong Cheng was very happy. After praising Gong Dai a few words, he took Gong Dai, Crown Prince, and the others back to the palace. The entire palace was jubilant, welcoming Gong Yimo's return. Now, Gong Yimo's popularity in Daiyu State was very high. Before, it was not obvious, but with the development of the river, the benefits of the convenient river channel were increasing. Everyone sang her praises, and someone even wrote a biography of Jiyu country's princess, which sold very well. At the celebration banquet in the evening, Gong Dai presented the documents seconded by the three countries. Now, they were only waiting for the law to catch up and officially sign the agreement. Therefore, Gong Cheng was very happy, and the rewards poured into the princess's residence like flowing water. The empress sat next to the emperor with a smile, looking a few years younger than before. Now that the river channel was open, people were also very grateful to Gong Che. Long Xiangxiang was dead, and the crown prince's position was unshakable. She, as the empress, was even more prosperous. Speaking of which, she still had to thank Gong Yimo. Therefore, after 30 years of drinking, the empress personally toasted Gong Yimo with a cup of wine and said with a smile, "Moa is really capable. Now that the matter of connecting the three countries has been settled, I wonder what Moa wants to do next." As she spoke, she very generously expressed her thoughts. "If you have any good ideas, don't forget your big brother Crown Prince. He has doted on you since you were young." Gong Yimo's status was equivalent to the Crown Prince, so when she heard her words, she replied without any hesitation. "All right, let's not talk about anything else. Right now, I really have something that I need to ask Big Brother Crown Prince to do." Gong Che was sitting right beside her. When he heard Gong Yimo's words, he immediately waved his hand to dismiss the singing and dancing, leaving only the sound of music. "What's the matter, royal sister? Just say it." In any case, as long as it was her request, he would definitely do it well. Gong Yimo smiled. "Brother Emperor, you're the only one who can do this. I want 5 big ships. I want the best craftsmanship and the most experienced boatmen in Daiyu State." When she said this, Gong Che immediately thought of the ship that Gong Yimo had built. That huge ship was the largest, most domineering, and most exquisite ship he had ever seen. Unfortunately, it was later blown up by her own hands. Gong Cheng was listening at the side. When he heard Gong Yimo say that she had a plan, he wanted to tease her a little. However, when he heard that it was about ships, his old face was somewhat embarrassed. Because he also remembered that huge ship. That was the birthday gift that Gong Yimo wanted to give him. Unfortunately, it was not fated. Gong Yimo pretended not to notice their abnormality and continued, "I have a shipyard at Hongzi Lake. Those masters are all experienced. When the time comes, I can recruit them to the capital and work with the capital's skilled craftsmen. The craftsmanship must be exquisite. Because I want to use these ships to go out to sea." "Go out to sea?" Gong Cheng slightly frowned. "What's so good about going to the overseas barbarians?" Gong Yimo smiled. Imperial Father, this son has read in a book that every continent has its own unique species. Although our Daiyu state is rich, isn't it better to be richer? Also, let those overseas barbarians have a good look at our Daiyu state's elegance. Gong Yimo's flattery was very good. Gong Cheng immediately laughed. Their Daiyu state was so rich, it should make the other barbarians envy them. It would be best if they surrendered to Daiyu state and become a vassal state. Chapter 389. Gong Che responded, "This matter is easy to handle. Imperial brother will do it as soon as possible." However, he was the same as Gong Cheng. He felt that there was not much benefit in going out to sea to other places. He also felt that Daiyu state was currently the richest country. If they went out to sea to trade with foreigners, it would definitely be Daiyu state that would suffer losses. However, this was Moa's request. If she wanted to do it, he would not ask for the reason. However, it was a ship going out to sea. He had to seriously supervise it. If something went wrong, Imperial sister would definitely blame him. Gong Che had never thought of letting Gong Yimo go out on the ship herself. Seeing that the two of them weren't in high spirits, Gong Yimo smiled. She had to explain herself, lest each and every one of them become happy for her and turn the sea trade into a parade to show off their country's prestige. When the time comes, she'll have face, but what she wants is real benefit. There were no outsiders at the moment. This was a private banquet in the palace. Moreover, the harem was purged. The concubines present were all suppressed by the empress. She did not have to worry about what she wanted to say. It is very important to show off our country's prestige. However, this is not the only reason I want to go out to sea this time. Gong Yimo's jade fingers picked up the wine cup. She smiled gently, but it was exceptionally alluring. At this time, Gong Cheng felt his heart move. His daughter was becoming more and more beautiful. After the age of 18, she was like a flower bud that bloomed. Her every frown and smile had a natural bearing. He looked at his sons present. Needless to say, the Crown Prince and Gong Dai, his other sons, all looked at Gong Yimo with admiration. They did not despise her for being a woman involved in politics. Instead, they admired her from the bottom of their hearts. He suddenly felt a little lucky that Gong Yimo was his daughter. If Gong Yimo was not his daughter, such an outstanding daughter, wouldn't she turn Daiyu state upside down? Gong Cheng silently praised himself in his heart. On the other side, Gong Yimo organized her thoughts and whispered, "Let's start with the basics. There are many places in Daiyu state that have fertile soil and plenty of rain, so there is no shortage of food. However, there are also many places that are dry and barren, so there is a shortage of food. Even though things have improved, we still have to rely on the weather to survive." Gong Yimo was also telling the truth. Speaking of this, Gong Cheng's heart was a little heavy. When he was young, he only wanted to unify the country, but now that he was getting older, he wanted the people to be rich, not just have enough to eat. Therefore, the problem that Gong Yimo was talking about was a problem that he was unable to solve. But it's not that there aren't any species that are suitable for that kind of land and have high yields. It's just that there aren't any on our land. Gong Cheng's eyes lit up, but then he said, "The 4 countries don't have it. Could it be that those overseas barbarians have it?" He didn't believe it. Unexpectedly, Gong Yimo actually nodded. Just like how they don't have our silk and porcelain, they also have something that we don't have. God is fair. Every land has its own wonderful things. Gong Yimo had a world map in her space, but she couldn't take it out because in the minds of modern people, the sky was round and the earth was square. Moreover, the overseas barbarians that they knew were actually places like Europe, Japan, Africa, and Guinea. They didn't know that there were also South America, Australia, and so on. Therefore, she could only vaguely say, there is a country overseas. They have a yellow crop that is resistant to drought and also has a high yield. The books call it corn. It is very suitable for Daiyu state's high arid land. In addition, there are potatoes and so on. In another continent, there are red fruits that are also considered vegetables. They are sweet and sour. The locals call them wolf peaches, but I call them tomatoes. There are also cabbage, coconut, carrots, and so on. If we can get all of them, the lives of the people in Dayu State will be richer. This is just the aspect of food. In other aspects, such as astronomy, mathematics, glass, rare animals, jewelry, and spices, we can also achieve integration. As the saying goes, take the strong points of others and make up for our weak points. Although Dayu State is already prosperous enough, who would mind if it became more prosperous? Everyone says that Dayu State is prosperous, but does it mean that the people have enough food to eat and clothes to cover their bodies? Only when everyone can afford to see a doctor, to study, to build a house, and to start paying attention to their appearance and life, that is prosperity. But now, only the rich in Dayu State can enjoy these things. What we need to do is to popularize this prosperity and make it a common phenomenon. Therefore, learning and integration are very important. They are the cornerstones of development. Gong Yimo's voice was clear and melodious. Every word she said, dragged out by the alcohol, made everyone present feel excited for no reason. Take the strong points of others and make up for our weak points. Popularize this prosperity and make it a common phenomenon. Moa. He looked at Gong Yimo. This daughter of his always brought him surprises. It was just like how he never knew that there would be a time when those overseas barbarians could contribute to Dayu State. I will urge Che to take care of this matter for you. I believe that you will definitely bring an even greater surprise to Dayu State. Gong Yimo smiled. Building a ship will take time. Let's not talk about that for now. Now that the national treasury is abundant, Imperial Father, shouldn't you donate some blood for the people? Emperor Gong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had just praised her, and now she was asking for a reward from him. Moa, just say what you want. Whatever you want to do, I will definitely support you. Gong Yimo's heart warmed slightly, and her eyes curved into crescents as she smiled. There is one thing that is indeed urgent. Now that the matter of the 3 countries' horse ranches is on the agenda, and the road repairs won't be done in a day or 2. If the 3 countries work together, it will be much faster. However, our Dayu State should also have its own national highway. Emperor Gong asked curiously, what's a national highway? Gong Yimo took a sip of wine, squinted her eyes, and smacked her lips. She said, actually, it's an official road. However, the current official road is too narrow. Moa wants to ask for permission to build an official road that runs horizontally from east to west. Emperor Cheng was stunned by Gong Yimo's words, traversing from east to west. His daughter was really amazing. Not only did she build a waterway that ran directly from north to south, the Tianzi Grand Canal, she also talked about a horse-drawn road that spanned across the 3 countries. Now, she wanted to build a national highway that ran horizontally from east to west. Emperor Gong really didn't know what she didn't dare to think or do. Is the existing official road not good enough? Emperor Gong still asked. After all, the governor of every city would pay taxes to repair the official road. Could it be that the official road wasn't enough? Gong Yimo smiled. Imperial Father, the existing official road is very good. It's enough for the time being. However, have you thought about the future? Could it be that it won't be enough in the future? Emperor Gong felt that it was unlikely. The road wasn't a consumable. It wouldn't be damaged if it was always there. How could it not be enough? Chapter 390. Gong Yimo reached out to pour herself a cup of wine and said casually, the so-called official roads are just roads built by the local governor for daily convenience. Many places are very narrow. Not to mention horses, we have to take a detour up and down the mountain when we encounter a mountain. It's extremely inconvenient for transportation. In my opinion, rather than official roads, it's better to call them small roads. Everyone present listened to her attentively, because as long as it came from her mouth, it was a feasible and important matter that would benefit the country and the people. Her voice was like heavenly music, and this resplendent hall was now under her command. She continued. The official roads are narrow. Even so, it's still enough. However, Dayu State has developed for hundreds of years, and the population is increasing. These official roads that meet the daily needs may not be enough in the future. What I want is a road that can be used for commerce. Gong Cheng frowned slightly. He thought of the letters from many places, saying that the population was increasing and that they needed to strengthen control. What about the national roads that Moa mentioned? Gong Yimo smiled, put down her wine cup, and said loudly, the national roads, as the name suggests, are the roads of a country. In the future, the waterways will be smooth, and the horse farms of the three countries will trade with each other. The domestic transportation of goods will definitely be faster. After all, the faster the transportation, the more profits. Time is money. However, the further west we go, the harder the road is to travel. Many places even have to take a big detour. Therefore, I want to use the existing foundation of the official roads to widen the roads and reduce the length of the roads by opening up the mountains. I want to use tough means to open up a more convenient road for transportation. Gong Cheng finally understood that Gong Yimo wanted to use a sharp weapon to open up a road. This realization made him sit up slightly, and a wide and flat road suddenly appeared in his mind. If there really was such a road, whether it was transportation or military reports, it would be much more convenient in the future, especially the military. Now that the four countries were at peace, it was fine. Once there was a problem, there would be a wide road to deploy troops and seize the opportunity. But after all, he was still not far-sighted enough. He did not understand the development maxim of the later generations: if you want to get rich, you have to build roads first. In order to control the gap between the rich and the poor from the beginning, this road was imperative. Moreover, it was mainly a horse track now. Gong Yimo didn't need cement, asphalt, steel bars, and iron mesh, so the project was much simpler. Gong Cheng pondered for a long time before he finally said, You've just returned and you're already so worried. I know about this matter. After I discuss it with the ministers, I'll give you an answer. Gong Yimo smiled. Thank you, Imperial Father. When the time comes, I hope that Imperial Father will allow this son to discuss the matter with me. Gong Cheng glared at her. I can't do without you. Just you wait. Gong Yimo smiled. Anyway, she was not in a hurry. In this life, she still had a lot of time to squander. He was only 18 years old. It was the age for him to achieve great things. At this moment, the Empress interrupted. Moa, look at you. How could you be led astray by His Majesty and the others? In any case, you're a girl and you're so beautiful. Let's put these things aside for now. From tomorrow onwards, you should come with me to hold more banquets and see how the capital's noble ladies play. You should also learn from them and give yourself a good holiday. Gong Yimo lowered her head and smiled. I'm afraid we won't be able to play together. After all, she had seen the prosperity of the future. She really didn't care for the playthings of the current women. The Empress looked at her unhappily. That won't do. In any case, you're a princess. You're a role model for the capital's noble ladies to learn from. But you're dressed too plainly. Tomorrow, I'll have someone take your measurements and make a few outfits according to the capital's fashion trends. Otherwise, it'll be too unpresentable. What else could Gong Yimo say? She could only sigh. In that case, many thanks for Imperial Mother's good intentions. Only then did the Empress nod and begin to serve the meal. The banquet was eaten peacefully and happily. Emperor Gong Cheng liked this kind of harmonious atmosphere more and more. He felt that Mo was their Daiyu state's lucky star. Not only did she have so many wonderful ideas, but she was also able to make people let go of their grudges and get along with each other more comfortably. After 30 minutes of drinking, Gong Yimo was also a little tired, so she got up and bid farewell. Gong Dai originally wanted to send her off, but Emperor Gong Cheng took advantage of the alcohol to discuss some important business matters with him and refused to let her go. Gong Yimo winked at him and gloatingly indicated that she didn't want him to send her off. She went to Taiji Palace alone. Other than the eldest princess's residence outside, Taiji Palace was also her residence. At this time, she had something on her mind and hadn't done it yet. On the way to Taiji Palace, there was a garden. This garden wasn't big, so not many people usually came here. Gong Yimo went straight to a big tree and buried the stone that could interfere with people's minds. After doing all this, she seemed to have put down something and sighed in relief. Moa! Gong Yimo turned around and found that it was actually Gong Che. After not seeing him for half a year, she still missed this older brother very much. Brother Crown Prince. He seemed to have run over and was still a little out of breath. When Gong Che saw her, he quickly calmed his breathing and revealed what he thought was his best smile as he walked towards her. Moa. I missed you so much. His words were completely natural, but when he saw that Gong Yimo was a little stunned, he quickly added. Girl, you are becoming more and more wild. You left for half a year. I'm afraid that you have already forgotten about Brother Crown Prince beyond the highest heavens. Gong Yimo quickly smiled. Because she drank a little wine, her face was still a little red. When she smiled, her watery eyes were especially charming under the illumination of the palace lanterns at night. Brother Crown Prince, what are you saying? How could I forget you? As she spoke, she took out something from her space. It was a jade hairpin. The shape was very sharp and the carving was very simple, but she handed it over with both hands. Look, I even specially brought you a gift when I came back. This is a jade hairpin that I personally made. It's made from Lu Yi's unique hard jade. It will look good on you and it can also protect you. Gong Che's eyes lit up when he heard this and reached out to take it. He looked at Gong Yimo with an uncontrollable tenderness, but he was no longer afraid because his illness had completely recovered. When he was aroused, his eyes would no longer turn red. So when he looked at Gong Yimo, his gaze was scorching and bold. It's rare for you to think of me like this. He felt sweet in his heart and wished that he could pull this lovely person in front of him into his embrace. But he couldn't. He suppressed it and said in a low voice, You were gone for so long, did you know that my illness has completely recovered? Gong Yimo's eyes lit up when she heard this. She took a few steps forward and looked at him carefully. You're really completely recovered? That's really great. She was sincerely happy. Gong Che nodded and used his fingers to gently stroke her hair as if he was tempted. His eyes were burning with love. Ian, everything is fine. All of this is thanks to you. Chapter 391. Gong Che's actions made Gong Yimo feel a little ticklish. She shrank back. Her delicate and lively appearance made Gong Che unable to hold himself back and hug her tightly. Moa, I missed you so much. Gong Yimo was shocked by his sudden action. Before she could resist, he said, Can you let me hug you for a while? I'm cured. I don't want to share this joy with anyone but you. Gong Yimo couldn't help but think of her previous life. In order to hide his illness, he let go of his hands and hugged her. Since he had a smooth sailing life in this life, she hoped that he would have a better life in the future. Gong Yimo let him hug her out of courtesy and reached out to pat his back. It'll be better in the future. Her soft voice rang in Gong Che's ears, causing his body to tremble imperceptibly as half of his body went numb. Gong Che knew that she was soft-hearted, and showing weakness was the most effective tactic. He also wanted to hug her like this for a little longer. But with her warm and fragrant body in his arms and the sweet fragrance of her body, when he breathed it into his abdomen, it was like a flame. It made his desire burn fiercely. He couldn't wait to press her into the flowers behind her, but fortunately, he still had some rationality left. Afraid that she would notice the changes in his body, he hugged her tightly for a while before letting go. He cupped her face with one hand and said softly, Can you tell me why you're so good to me? Tell me you love me. Tell me that I'm different to you. He sincerely hoped for that. Gong Che even thought that as long as Gong Yimo responded to him a little, it would be enough. As long as he could see her often, he would be satisfied. He would promise that he wouldn't do anything to hurt her. Time wasn't as hard as it was for her. He didn't want much, just a little bit of her gentleness. But now, she was flying higher and further away. Even his last bit of infatuation had become a delusion. So much so that for so many days and nights, his heart ached from thinking about it. Every time he thought about it, he wanted to tie Moa to his bed so that he could do whatever he wanted. Gong Che's passionate gaze made Gong Yimo a little uncomfortable. It was as if she was being roasted on something. She laughed awkwardly. Why do you ask so many questions? You're my brother and you treat me well. Of course, I have to repay those who treat me well. What if I'm not your brother? Gong Che asked subconsciously, but it hit the nail on the head. Gong Yimo was shocked and tried to comfort him. What are you saying? You were born to be my brother. So if there's anything good, I definitely won't forget about you. But I really hope that I'm not your brother. That way, I can use force to take you, possess you, and plunder you. Gong Che sighed deeply. I don't want those benefits. I only want you, little idiot. So Imperial Brother is here? Gong Dai's cold voice had a trace of a smile. He seemed to be in a good mood. Gong Che secretly gritted his teeth. Why did Gong Dai appear every time he wanted to have some private time with Moa? He was even wondering if there was a spy by his side. Gong Yimo took a step back and looked at Gong Dai. She found that he wasn't angry. Because he drank some wine, his pale face had a trace of red. It was strange that he gave off the feeling of an immortal descending into the mortal world. Imperial Father was looking for you. I didn't expect you to be here. He walked towards Gong Yimo. His tall and slender figure was already a head taller than Gong Yimo. Standing beside her, he was especially eye-catching. Gong Che was a little angry. He said in a low voice, "Is that so? Imperial Father, what's the matter?" Gong Dai looked at the dazed Imperial sister. He was so angry that he wanted to pinch her face. But there were outsiders, so he endured it. So he stared at Gong Yimo and chuckled. I heard that it's about Imperial Brother's wedding. It's only half a month now, so he probably wants to ask about your progress. Gong Che was shocked and hurriedly looked at Gong Yimo. However, he saw that Gong Yimo didn't have any reaction, as if she had already accepted this matter. Gong Che wanted to say something, but in the end, he didn't say it. He wanted to tell Gong Yimo that his marriage was only a stopgap measure. He wouldn't touch Su Miaolan, and he would keep his purity clean. From the age of 16 to the age of 22, in these 6 years, from the first time he felt impulsive until now, the only person he wanted to touch was Gong Yimo. However, he couldn't say it now. In that case, Moa, I'll take my leave first. Gong Che smiled bitterly, but in his heart, he firmly told himself that it didn't matter. It would be fine when he became the emperor. Millimeter. Okay, Brother Crown Prince, go ahead. Gong Yimo smiled. Only then did Gong Che feel slightly relieved. However, when their gazes passed over Gong Dai, there was a murderous aura between the two. After Gong Che left, the smile on Gong Dai's face disappeared. Gong Yimo felt that Gong Dai was a little strange. When she raised her head, she saw that he was looking at her with a burning gaze, as if he was a little angry. Strange, what was there to be angry about when she spoke to the Crown Prince? Actually, I also want to know why you're so good to the Crown Prince. Gong Dai drank quite a bit tonight. If it was any other day, even if he was unwilling, he wouldn't say it out loud. However, today, under the influence of alcohol, and seeing Gong Che hug Gong Yimo, he only felt sour in his heart and couldn't hold it in anymore. When he said this, there was a trace of anger and grievance on his handsome face. He had only seen this kind of expression when he was young. Gong Yimo was stunned by the question. The garden was quiet, and there was an unknown fragrance of flowers. The originally peaceful night, after being asked by Gong Dai, actually had a hint of sex. I'm good to him, because he's the Crown Prince, Gong Yimo said without much confidence. After thinking about it carefully, she was indeed good to Gong Che, even exceeding the standard of a younger sister to an older brother. Is that so? Gong Dai suddenly sneered. He originally didn't want to argue, but when he thought about how there was another person who was different to the royal sister, he felt like his heart was being squeezed by something. He tried his best to learn everything about her, to be magnanimous, calm, and self-controlled. However, he was very clear in his heart that he wasn't like this. If the other person wasn't her, he could be magnanimous, calm, and self-controlled. But the other person was her. He only wanted to follow his heart and tie her to his side. He wanted her to only see him, to only be good to him, to only smile at him. He clearly shouldn't say it, but at this moment, he couldn't control himself. Just because of my older brother, you can come up with plans for him, put yourself in danger for him, and almost died because of him. Then why don't you care about your other brothers? If they had your help, they wouldn't be any worse than the current Crown Prince. Gong Yimo was shocked by Gong Dai's aggressiveness, but why was he different to Gong Che? How should she explain this? Chapter 392. After she let go of her hatred, Gong Che, as the person she loved, hated, and was most familiar with in her past life, was naturally different to her. However, this difference didn't have much meaning. It was more like a thought. For example, in her past life, she hoped that he would be able to secure his position as the crown prince and that he would recover from his illness sooner. In this life, she did it. It was more like she was completing one of her regrets and cutting off all the grudges and entanglements. After being reborn, she also understood Gong Che. It was only because he betrayed her that she couldn't untie the knot in her heart, so she treated him well without any other intentions. And since he treated her well, she felt that politeness demands politeness and wouldn't be touched. I treat him well. Gong Yimo didn't want to lie to Gong Dai, but this question wasn't easy to answer, so she said, it's probably because he was the only one who treated me well when everyone else didn't like us, so politeness demands politeness. It's not the same. Gong Dai shook his head lightly. I understand you. This is not the same. Gong Yimo couldn't help but lower her eyelids and sigh softly. So what? Don't I treat you better? Gong Dai pursed his lips. It's not the same. He wanted to monopolize her. He wanted to be the only exception. Gong Yimo only felt bitterness in her heart. She hadn't felt this kind of entanglement in a long time. At least there's one thing you need to know. Gong Yimo looked at Gong Dai and pursed her lips. I will never have feelings for him, because the betrayal was too tragic. Even if she knew that Gong Che was different in this life, she would still keep a respectful distance. Why? Gong Dai pressed on because he also wanted to know why Royal Sister clearly treated Gong Che and him differently, but she didn't have feelings for Gong Che. How could she tell him this? Gong Yimo sighed. Gong Dai. You're forcing me. Her words immediately silenced Gong Dai. He stood there, speechless. How could he forget that Royal Sister had a knot in her heart? How could he force her? Gong Dai was secretly annoyed that he was blinded by jealousy, but he also felt a little wronged. I just want to be the only one in Royal Sister's heart, not the best. The night was as cold as water. His voice was low and hoarse, with a hint of disappointment. The proud Gong Dai could only surrender when he met Gong Yimo. In my heart, there's only Royal Sister. But in Royal Sister's heart, although I'm the most important, it's not because of love. You said before that a drop of water should be repaid with a gushing spring. Since I love you so much, I don't need you to repay me with a gushing spring. I just want you to be equal to me, okay? As long as they were equal. Gong Yimo was silent. She really wanted to try, but she didn't have the courage to promise him. She had a knot in her heart with Gong Dai, so she really couldn't take this step. But she looked at Gong Dai. His gaze was so firm, as if he wouldn't back down no matter what. How could she reject him like this? She sighed, took a step forward, and straightened his collar. Her little face was wrinkled, as if she was thinking about something. Their breaths were so close. Her actions were so gentle, like a wife sending her husband off. Seeing her like this, Gong Dai couldn't say anything to make her feel awkward. He just looked at her face, as if it was imprinted in the deepest part of his soul. Gong Dai, I think I treat you differently. Her white fingertips rested on Gong Dai's chest. Gong Yimo suddenly spoke, and for the first time, she was so serious. There are some people that I may treat differently, but I have my reasons. For example, Kim Yoon, or Longcheng Wuji. But you are an accident. Originally, I should treat you the same way I treat Gong Che. I wouldn't have any feelings for you. Her words shocked Gong Dai. He wanted to catch something, but because it was too fast, he didn't catch it. He listened to her continue. Originally, we shouldn't have come to this step, but you forced me to face my heart. I shouldn't have feelings for you, but I did. Gong Dai's eyes suddenly lit up. This was the first time the Royal Sister admitted her feelings. She admitted that it wasn't just his one-sided coercion, she also had a heart. At that moment, Gong Dai's whole person came alive. This change was really moving. Gong Yimo couldn't help but step forward. She tiptoed and gently planted a kiss on his lips. The garden was quiet, the moon was round and bright, and there was an unknown fragrance of flowers in the air. But all of this couldn't compare to Gong Yimo's gentle kiss. Gong Dai even wondered if he was drunk and was hallucinating. So he opened his eyes wide, looking a little cute. Those clear black and white eyes reflected Gong Yimo's smiling eyes. Then, she gently bit his lips. Now, do you understand? Gong Yimo moved back a little. Their breaths intertwined. Gong Dai asked in a daze. Understand what? At that moment, the moonlight shone on her face. Her eyes were full of stars. I understand. In my heart, you are not the best, but the only one. Gong Yimo blinked. The only exception. Gong Dai's heart thumped. Gong Yimo said seriously, if one day, I can overcome this hurdle, then I will be with you. This was an unexpected gain. Gong Dai was so happy that he wanted to hug her and spin her around. At this moment, he thought that the hurdle Gong Yimo was talking about was that she still couldn't accept the feelings between blood relatives. He didn't know that it was much more difficult than that. But what did it matter? He was already satisfied and didn't care anymore. Royal Sister had him in her heart. He wasn't the most important person, but the only exception. He gently held Gong Yimo's hand. The jealousy from before had long been thrown away. He was a little nervous, but he told her firmly. Royal Sister, I will wait for you. I will wait for the day you accept me. Gong Yimo's mood was complicated, but she still nodded. And because Gong Dai was too excited, he didn't realize that there was a figure hiding under a tree in the distance, watching the scene in front of him. Prince Chi liked the eldest princess. Although he didn't see that kiss, he saw the two of them looking at each other affectionately under the moonlight. His heart thumped and he quickly chanted a meditation mantra to calm himself down. After digesting this news, a cold light flashed in his eyes. He planned to quickly go back and tell his master everything. When that time came, he would definitely have a meteoric rise. But before he could leave, two black figures blocked his escape route. You saw it all? One of the black figures laughed softly. That laughter was ghostly and cold, making people's hearts turn cold. Since that's the case, then go and see the King of Hell. As he spoke, the other person had already stepped forward, covered his mouth and slit his neck. Blood splattered. Chapter 393. The poor spy managed to escape Gong Dai's detection with great difficulty, but was killed by Gong Dai's secret guard. His dream of a meteoric rise was shattered in a second. From this, it could be seen how powerful Gong Dai was in the palace. Gong Yimo heard a sound and quickly turned her head to look. However, Gong Dai was one step ahead of her and kissed her deeply. He was so eager and joyful that Gong Yimo found it hard to refuse. Don't be afraid, no one is there. Gong Yimo was a little dizzy as their lips and teeth intertwined. However, after hearing what he said, it was obvious that he had brought a secret guard. Then, wouldn't her actions just now have been seen by others? Her face flushed red as she angrily pushed Gong Dai away. He actually dared to bring a secret guard in the palace. This person was really getting more and more daring. I'm going to rest. Goodbye. She turned around and quickly ran towards Taiji Palace. That monkey had a wild nature. She still wanted to go back and have a good time. Gong Dai didn't chase after her because he coldly saw a corpse being dragged away in the dark. His red lips curled up as he sneered. Although the Long family was dead, there were still people in Dayu State who wanted to secretly trip him up. However, he didn't expect these people to be so daring. It seemed that he hadn't killed for half a year, so their minds were active again. In that case, he didn't mind playing with them again. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner. A few days passed. The emperor was very happy about Gong Yimo's return. Moreover, the things she said were also in the process of being built. This made Gong Cheng eager to get into action. He couldn't wait to join these young people in a big fight. However, extreme joy turned to sorrow. He suddenly fell ill. Gong Yimo served him medicine at the side and muttered, Imperial Father, I really have to hand it to you. You can still get a fever in this kind of weather. You're already an adult, but you still make people worry. Gong Cheng pretended to be angry and said with a fierce face, You're becoming more and more lawless. Is Jin someone you can teach? But as soon as he said that, he coughed a few times. Gong Yimo saw this and stuck out her tongue unhappily. But she still hurriedly put the bowl of medicine aside and handed him a handkerchief. Gong Yimo frowned and said to Chang Shi, who was beside her. Eunuch Chang Shi, why did Imperial Father suddenly fall ill? What's going on? In his impression, the Emperor's health was particularly good. Although he had passed away very early in his previous life, in this life, he had already passed the age of 42. He should not have any more problems. Chang Shi wanted to say something but stopped. Gong Cheng glared at him and then said to Gong Yimo, what do you mean what's going on? How can people not get sick? I'm old, so it's normal for me to be a little sick. Gong Yimo widened her eyes and said exaggeratedly, what? Imperial Father is not old at all. Imperial Father is good-looking and has an imposing appearance. Such an outstanding person will definitely live to be 100 years old. The Emperor laughed. You don't have a lock on your mouth. Moreover, why is it 100 years old? People will say long live when they compliment me. Gong Yimo frowned and said in a low voice, those are all lies. If Imperial Father can live to be 100 years old, it will be my greatest wish. Gong Cheng smiled and touched Gong Yimo's head with some relief. This daughter of his, although she has been crafty since she was young, but sometimes, when she was sincere to people, it really moved people. She would not say those empty words. Every word she said was very honest and sincere. Sometimes, he really hoped that Gong Yimo was really his and Shualian's child. I'm very clear about my body. I'm afraid it's a little difficult to live to be 100 years old. At this time, Gong Cheng was like an ordinary rich man, complaining to his children, so, when you're alive, you have to be filial to me, Your Majesty. The white-haired Chang Shi helplessly shouted. How could the Emperor curse himself like that? But Gong Cheng didn't care and smiled, it's the truth. At this time, he suddenly thought of something and said in a low voice, Moa Imperial Father's body looks good, but when he was young, he was seriously injured once and almost died. Gong Yimo was stunned. Why hadn't she heard of this before? Gong Cheng was the Emperor of Dai Yu State. If he was seriously injured, wouldn't Dai Yu State turn the sky upside down? Seeing that she didn't believe him, Gong Cheng smiled and said, it's not in Dai Yu State, but in Wn City, which is the original Shui country. The two words Shui country made Gong Yimo's lively little face slightly pause. Then, she heard Gong Cheng say, it's the country where your imperial mother lived. Now, it no longer exists. You were still young when your imperial mother died. I'm afraid you don't remember, right? Gong Yimo nodded, I don't have much of an impression of it. Gong Cheng suddenly sighed. He was originally full of vitality, but with this sigh, he unexpectedly showed a somewhat decadent appearance. He touched Gong Yimo's face, but it was as if he saw through her and saw another person. Shui country was a very strange small country. Their people were very poor, so they repeatedly harassed Dai Yu State's border. However, I insisted on destroying Shui country because this country was really too strange. It should be the only country that was still popular with witchcraft at that time. Having such a neighbor was really unsettling, so I pressed the border with an army, wanting to directly subdue Shui country. Seeing Gong Yimo listening attentively, Gong Cheng smiled, I can only blame myself for being too young and impetuous at that time. I thought that such a small country could be destroyed in 7 days at most with 100,000 troops. However, I didn't expect that their methods were so strange. I was caught off guard and was poisoned by their strong poison. At that time, I almost died. My 100,000 troops would also be like a group of dragons without a leader. In order to avoid this situation, Chang Shi personally sneaked into Shui country and captured their goddess, who is also the princess of Shui country, and forced her to detoxify me. She is Shualian. Gong Yimo didn't expect there to be such a story. Then what happened? Then, Gong Cheng smiled, as if he thought of something beautiful and interesting. Your imperial mother was a very weak person, but she was very stubborn. She refused to detoxify me. Later, Chang Shi had no choice but to say that as long as she was detoxified, Dai Yu State would withdraw its troop. At that time, when she heard that, she really did loosen up and detoxify me. However, because I was poisoned for too long, my foundation was damaged, and I haven't been able to recuperate since then. Gong Yimo frowned. Gong Cheng wasn't a person who went back on his words. What did he mean by Shui country was destroyed? Gong Cheng's expression suddenly became cold. At that time, I really wanted to withdraw the troops and send Shuilian back. However, the king of Shui country thought that I had insulted Shuilian, so he overestimated himself and rebelled against me. He even wanted to kill my savior in public. Naturally, I wasn't willing, so I broke my promise for the first time and destroyed this country. Speaking of this, he sighed, but because of Shuilian's friendship, I didn't kill them all. I only expelled those who were unwilling to submit. Chapter 394. When Gong Yimo heard Gong Cheng's words, she realized that the Shui clansmen she met were the ones who were expelled because they refused to surrender. The others who were willing to stay had long assimilated with the people of Dai Yu state. Seeing her deep in thought, Gong Cheng's expression was conflicted for a moment before he asked in a low voice. Moa, do you resent Zhen? After all, Zhen caused you to lose your mother's clan. Gong Yimo stared blankly for a moment before she revealed a sweet smile. How could that be? She thought about her words and said seriously, state affairs, family affairs, and private affairs, I'm very clear about them. After all, our positions are different, and our political views are different. As for me, I'm a person who can look at problems rationally. Don't worry, Father Emperor. Gong Cheng felt that it was a bit inconceivable because Gong Yimo was only 18 years old. How could she see through things to this extent? He said after some consideration, Zhen caused you to lose your mother's clan, and also caused you to stay in the cold palace for 6 years. Do you really not resent Zhen? Gong Yimo waited for him and muttered, I used to resent you, but, if Father Emperor tells me more about Imperial Mother, I'll consider forgiving you. Her words clearly showed that she didn't put these things in her heart. She was always like this, magnanimous, but pretending to be heartless. Gong Cheng's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He was gratified and guilty. What virtue did he have to be able to pick up such an outstanding daughter? All right, Zhen will tell you. As he spoke, he no longer avoided the past and recalled the past. The entire Jiaoyang Hall was exceptionally harmonious. The people in the emperor's sleeping quarters were all trustworthy. As they quietly worked on the matters at hand, they would intentionally or unintentionally listen to the father and daughter's conversation. This scene was like an ordinary father and daughter, with a sense of intimacy. Green smoke rose from the golden dragon top incense burner. As Gong Cheng spoke, he actually felt a little sleepy. Gong Yimo was still in high spirits. Father Emperor, you just brought Imperial Mother into the palace like this. She's such a stubborn person, isn't she very unhappy? Gong Sheng lay on the dragon bed, narrowing his eyes as he thought, your Imperial Mother is very unhappy, but, she didn't seek death. As he spoke, he glanced at Gong Yimo. She had discovered that she was pregnant. As a mother, she would not commit suicide so easily. Gong Yimo's eyes lit up. Then Imperial Father, how did you conquer Imperial Mother's heart in the end? There was a trace of a smile on the corner of Gong Cheng's mouth. Naturally, it was through his meticulous care, his overbearing pampering, and his determination to betray the world. But he himself didn't expect that when he was young, he would have such a crazy time. The face that used to only appear in his dreams was now becoming clearer and clearer. He could even hear her cold and stubborn voice calling his name. Shuilian, are you all right? Father. Father. Gong Yimo was waiting for him to reply, but she found that he had already fallen asleep. Chang she saw His Majesty sleeping so soundly and breathed a sigh of relief. When Gong Yimo came out of the room, he whispered, Princess is really capable. His Majesty has been suffering from insomnia and dreams recently. Even in his dreams, he frowned. It's rare for him to sleep so soundly today. Gong Yimo said, just now Imperial Father said that he was poisoned when he was young, and his body has not recovered. Is there no solution? At the mention of this, Chang Shi wrinkled his old face and said helplessly, the poison was too toxic. Even if it was detoxified later, it would still leave behind hidden dangers. Every time it was cold, His Majesty would have a splitting headache. When Imperial concubine Shui was still alive, there was no way to cure the root of the illness because it required the Snow Clan's Snow Ganoderma. But the Snow Ganoderma grew in the Snow Clan's legendary treasure cave. The Snow Clan members who knew where the cave was all died when the Snow Country was destroyed. So His Majesty's illness was incurable. The word Snow Clan's treasure cave made Gong Yimo raise her eyebrows. Imperial father often has headaches, why don't we know about it? Chang, she said, His Majesty does not want anyone to know about this. If His Majesty had not told you about this today, I would not have told you so much. Gong Yimo snorted, Enrich, you want to save face to suffer. Ayo, little grandaunt. Chang, she pinched the horsetail whisk and said, is this something you should say? All right, His Majesty is asleep. This servant will keep watch. Princess, quickly go and rest. Gong Yimo said, all right, but if Imperial Father has any abnormalities, you must immediately come and tell me. Yes, yes, yes. Quickly go. Chang, she respectfully sent her out of Jiaoyang Palace Hall, and only then did Gong Yimo return to Taiji Palace Hall. Recently, because the emperor was ill, Gong Yimo did not leave the palace and had been staying in the palace. But when she returned today, she found that the palace servants were trembling in fear. Gong Yimo thought for a moment and knew that it must be Gong Dai who came. That guy was really becoming more and more unrestrained. Gong Yimo had all the palace servants leave, and she walked into the room. She saw that Gong Dai was indeed in her room looking at a painting. It was a simple doodle from when he was young. The painting was of the cute and aloof Gong Dai when he was young. Time passed quickly. At that time, she was only 12 years old, and now she was 18 years old. 6 years had passed very quickly. And Gong Dai was the same. He had changed from a delicate and cold little bun to a handsome and cold young man. Just one side profile was exquisite and perfect, but it gave people a feeling of being detached from the world. Although he was dressed in black, who wouldn't associate him with a banished immortal? Hearing the sound, Gong Dai turned his head slightly. The moment those slightly raised black jade eyes glanced over, Gong Yimo actually felt her little heart beat a few more times. Then she said fiercely, you rascal, can't you restrain yourself a little in the palace? Gong Dai smiled slightly and walked towards her. Royal sister, do you mean that it's okay to do it outside the palace? That won't do. Gong Yimo took a few steps back and said sternly, also, if you want to talk, then talk. You're not allowed to come so close to me. Gong Dai blinked when he heard that. Clearly, he still had that cold and handsome face, but Gong Yimo felt a little wronged. I'm going to leave in a while. I just want to take a look at you. I'll leave after taking a look. How could Gong Yimo be ruthless when he said that? Anyway, the palace servants had been sent away by her, so it should be fine. Seeing that her expression had softened, Gong Dai quickly went forward and put his hands around her waist. Gong Yimo found herself sitting on Gong Dai's lap in an embarrassing position. Her face flushed red. Wait. Gong Dai's clear eyes looked at her unblinkingly, as if she was the one with dirty thoughts. Where are your hidden guards? Gong Dai smiled lightly. They're not here. I sent them out. Gong Yimo then relaxed slightly. After relaxing, she despised herself. Gong Yimo, you're done for. Your first reaction was not to push him away, but to be afraid that someone would see. She put on a serious face. Since you've seen, can you leave now? Gong Ju raised his eyebrows slightly. What if he wanted more after seeing it? What should he do? Chapter 395. Gong Yimo immediately sensed his intentions and hurriedly said, wait, I have something important to tell you. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly and hugged Gong Yimo without letting go. He whispered in her ear, speak. Gong Yimo shrunk her neck. That white chin looked so shy and seductive in Gong Dai's eyes. Her slightly shrunk neck and her delicate skin were like fine white jade. Gong Yimo sat on his lap and naturally felt the changes in his body. This time, she was so scared that she didn't dare to move and honestly talked about the important matter. It's like this. Imperial Father is sick. Moreover, I found out that Imperial Father is sick because there is a hidden danger in his body that is difficult to suppress. As he gets older, it starts to act up. Actually, Gong Dai knew that Emperor Gong Cheng had headaches, but Emperor Gong Cheng didn't want others to know, so he pretended not to know. So what? It was normal for old people to die of illness. He secretly invited a godly doctor to take a look, but the doctor only shook his head and said that the root of the illness in the emperor's body was difficult to cure. Gong Yimo lowered her head and muttered, "It's fine if it can't be cured, but today I heard from eunuch Chang Shi that there is a snowlingji in the Shui clan's treasure. That thing can cure Imperial Father's chronic illness." Gong Dai looked at her lowered head and unconsciously aggrieved appearance. His Adam's apple bobbed. "You want to find the Shui clan's treasure?" He thought of something and said, "Don't you want to repair the national highway?" Gong Yimo nodded. "That's why I thought of you." She raised her head and looked at Gong Ju with a pair of extremely trusting eyes. Her voice was loud and clear. "I want you to help me repair the national highway." Gong Dai was stunned. There was no other reason. If it was just ordinary repairs, it would be fine. But Royal Sister actually wanted to teach him the method of making refined weapons. This was no longer a simple trust. This was something that she would rather die than let go of. Gong Yimo's heart pounded when she said this because she didn't know if this was the right thing to do. But if she had to hand over the secrets, the person she trusted the most would definitely be Gong Dai. Gong Dai didn't want to be the emperor. He held great power and gradually controlled the economy. In other words, if he wanted to be the emperor of Dai Yu State, Gong Che wouldn't be his opponent. He was much stronger than in her previous life. In her previous life, Gong Che had her help, but in the end, he and Gong Ju shared the world equally. In this life, she helped Gong Ju even more. His strength could be imagined. Therefore, Gong Dai was trustworthy. He had a high status, wasn't greedy for power, and wouldn't be tempted by money or beauty. He was also very capable. Most importantly, he was taught by her. He was the only person in the world who knew about physics and chemistry other than her. Excavating a mountain was technically difficult, but as long as he was taught the ropes, he could do it well. But this matter was also risky. What if Gong Ju changed his mind after the woman was given to him? Once his ambition swelled, he could easily flatten the 4 countries and unify the Central Plains. Even if she wanted to stop him, the chances of victory were 50%. It would cause great suffering and the result would be even more terrible than in her previous life. But she still believed in him. In this life, he wouldn't betray her trust. She firmly believed. Gong Dai stared at her quietly. No one knew better than Gong Dai how careful Gong Yimo was. She guarded this weapon and wasn't willing to tell anyone. She was afraid that the person who used it would have evil intentions. She was afraid that in front of such a huge temptation, even the most upright person would become greedy. Therefore, she had always been on guard. Besides Gong Yimo, he was also the person who understood the power of this weapon the most. He even felt that as long as Gong Yimo let him test it once, he would be able to figure out its composition. At that time, with this weapon in hand, he would be invincible in this world. No man would be able to resist this kind of temptation. He looked at the little person in his arms. Unknowingly, she was no longer the omnipotent and tall sister. She was now a little woman who would act spoiled in his arms. He had grown up, and she had become more and more petite. At this moment, she was looking at him with her pair of clear eyes. Her eyes were full of trust, but there was also a hidden uneasiness. This thing, in her heart, was perhaps more important than her life, but she was willing to give it to him. Gong Dai couldn't hold back anymore. He hugged her and kissed her. She seemed to be a little dazed. Her small mouth was slightly open, giving him a chance to deepen the kiss. Gong Yimo was talking to him about serious matters, but he suddenly attacked her. She wanted to resist, but her body was held tightly. However, as he became more and more skilled at kissing, her body was melted by his body temperature and turned into a puddle of spring water. Bastard! She wanted to talk about serious matters. The room was quiet, but some suspicious and ambiguous sounds could be heard. They were entangled and breathing heavily. Yes. Yes, Gong Yimo reached out her small hand to push him away, but her eyes were moist. She couldn't wait to be moistened by him. Gong Dai was pushed away by her, but he hugged her and kissed her fiercely before he was willing to stop. Seeing her red lips, Gong Dai looked down and gritted his teeth. "I'll go find the Snow Clan's treasure. You go repair the national highway." Gong Yimo was stunned, but she saw Gong Dai looking at her as if he hadn't had enough. I don't think I will change. If you leave it to me, it will be absolutely safe. But I don't want you to be immersed in the worry that I will change at any time. Gong Yimo was a little ashamed. Trusting him was one thing, but worrying about him was another. Seeing her lower her head and shyly shrink into his arms, Gong Dai suddenly felt like he was raising a daughter. It made his lips curl up slightly. He followed her in everything, coaxed her, loved her, and didn't want to let go of her for a moment. Wasn't it just raising a rare treasure? But Gong Dai suddenly frowned. Gong Yimo looked at him, thinking that he had changed his mind. Gong Dai said with a little annoyance, "But if I do this, won't I have to be separated from you again? Royal sister, you really know how to torment people." Gong Yimo heard this and glared at him angrily. "This is a good opportunity to perform meritorious deeds. Here, I'll give it to you for free." Gong Dai laughed. It was good enough that he didn't usurp the throne. Why would he care about meritorious deeds? That won't do. I don't want father's reward. I want your reward. As he said this, he once again sucked on Gong Yimo's lips. Gradually, he had an idea in his heart. Now that Daiyu state was peaceful and the 4 countries were peaceful, the royal sister's wish was about to be fulfilled. And if the bank in his hands were to develop for another 2 years, there would be no one in the 4 countries who could rival him. Since that was the case, he would find his imperial sister after finding the snow racer mushroom. Then, they would finish building this national highway together. When the time came, he would take imperial sister and live in seclusion. It would be fine if he traveled around the countries or lived in seclusion, because he could no longer control himself. Yes, he had decided. When he found the snow Ganoderma and went to look for her, he would ask for her hand in marriage. By then, he would be 18. He could have a good taste of the lovely person in his arms. Moreover, he could feel that the royal sister's resistance was getting weaker and weaker. She was only 1 step away. Perhaps he needed an opportunity. Chapter 397. Gong Yimo naturally did not know any of this. She was only thinking, why did the emperor suddenly fall ill? He was clearly fine before. Then she felt a little vexed. She should not have come back. She should have stayed by the emperor's side. When Gong Yimo arrived, the room was already filled with imperial physicians. They were shocked to see Gong Yimo enter. The emperor's illness had to be kept a secret. No one dared to leak it. How could Gong Yimo care about them? Seeing the princess arrive, everyone retreated to the side so that she could sit by the emperor's bed. At this moment, the emperor's complexion was very bad. His forehead was covered in cold sweat and he was muttering something. Gong Yimo leaned over to listen. She heard him calling her and Shuilian's names. Her heart immediately ached. "What's going on?" she said angrily. The dissatisfaction in her voice made everyone kneel down. Gong Yimo usually did not get angry, but when she did, her little face darkened and her murderous aura overflowed. She was even scarier than the emperor. At this moment, Chang Shi, who was standing at the side, said with a conflicted expression, "Princess, don't worry. The imperial physicians have seen him just now. The medicine is already brewing. His Majesty might have a fever that caused this illness. He will be fine after the fever subsides." Gong Yimo was still unhappy. "Where's the medicine?" "The medicine is here. The medicine is here." At this moment, a young eunuch hurriedly rushed over. Under Chang Shi's signal, he directly delivered the medicine to Gong Yimo. At this moment, she was expressionless. The atmosphere in the bedchamber was terrifyingly oppressive. The imperial physicians below did not dare to breathe loudly for fear of angering her. Chang Shi supported the emperor and allowed Gong Yimo to feed him the medicine spoon by spoon. He sighed in his heart, not knowing what to do. He could see that the princess was very sensible. She also cared for the emperor. This matter must have been initiated by the Prince of Qi. If the Prince of Qi wanted to get something, even the princess would not be his opponent. However, should he let the emperor know about this matter? He was loyal to the emperor, but Gong Yimo was also a child he liked very much. He didn't want to see the father and daughter fall out because of this matter. But if he didn't say anything, wouldn't it cause even greater trouble? Eunuch Changshi? Changshi was stunned. He realized that it was Gong Yimo who was calling him. He was distracted just now. The young eunuch who delivered the medicine was Changshi's trusted aide. He was also very quick-witted and quickly said, "Head steward, the princess asked you just now, has His Majesty ever been in such a situation before?" Changshi hurriedly looked at Gong Yimo and found that she was looking at him seriously. Her expression was inquisitive, and he smiled to cover it up. "Old people are useless. I was distracted just now." Replying to the princess, "His Majesty has never been like this before," Gong Yimo frowned. In other words, it was getting worse as she got older. After feeding him the medicine, she helped Gong Cheng lie down and then looked at the people below coldly. Who has always been in charge of Imperial Father's chronic illness? At this time, a very old Imperial physician saluted and replying to the princess, "It's this old official who is in charge." Gong Yimo nodded. "Imperial Father's illness, if there's snow Ganoderma, can it be completely eradicated?" The old Imperial physician showed a difficult expression. After thinking for a moment, he deliberated and said, replying to the princess, "His Majesty's body has been damaged for too long. Even if there's snow Ganoderma as a guide, to remove the root of the illness, this official only has 50% certainty." Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes in displeasure. The certainty is so low. At this time, Gong Dai also came. He glanced at the people kneeling on the ground. Seeing Gong Yimo frowning, he asked directly, "What's wrong?" Seeing Gong Dai, Gong Yimo felt a little relieved. "Nothing, it's just that we have to find the snow Ganoderma quickly." She listened from the side. The princess is actually going to find the snow Ganoderma? One must know that in order to find the snow Ganoderma, His Majesty almost turned the former Shui country upside down. Gong Yimo wanted to find it as difficult as ascending to heaven. But her concern is really touching. Although she's not His Majesty's biological daughter, she's much more considerate than His Majesty's biological daughter. Changshi glanced at Gong Dai, but saw that Gong Dai was also looking at him. His heart couldn't help but jump, thinking that Gong Dai discovered something. At this time, Gong Cheng suddenly coughed a few times and woke up. "Imperial Father!" Gong Yimo hurriedly called out and looked at him with wide eyes. The emperor's head hurt, but seeing so many people in the room, he said in a hoarse voice, "What's going on? Such a big scene." Gong Yimo breathed a sigh of relief and patted her chest. "Scared me to death. Imperial Father, your old illness acted up and you fainted from the pain." Gong Cheng subconsciously glanced at Gong Dai. Gong Yimo glared at him. "What, are you afraid of people knowing?" "Imperial Father, your health is more important. Everything else is empty. I've decided to go find the Shui country's treasure and find the snow Ganoderma for you." "No," Gong Cheng suddenly said in a hurry, but because he said it too quickly, he couldn't help but cough a few times. Seeing him making such a big movement, Gong Yimo patted him and asked in puzzlement, "What's the matter?" Gong Cheng's mind quickly thought of the words, and whispered, "Shui country is strange, who knows what this so-called treasure is? It's too dangerous, you're not allowed to go." Gong Yimo pouted, "It's hard to say whether we can find it or not. Besides, your daughter is so powerful, even if we find it, there won't be any danger. You can rest assured." But Gong Cheng's expression was still very serious. He thought for a while and said, "Jin usually doesn't have this problem, so it's not a big deal. If you really have the heart, when the trade route is developed in the future, you can keep an eye out for Jin. After all, Jin doesn't believe that the snow Ganoderma can only grow in the Shui country's treasure. If you keep an eye out for this, it's much more practical than looking for that illusory treasure." Gong Yimo felt that what Gong Cheng said seemed to be reasonable. She also didn't believe that there was a plant that could only be found in one place. It seemed that she could also ask Kim Yoon and Longcheng Wuji to keep an eye out for her. Thinking of this, she nodded reluctantly. After Gong Dai found that Gong Yimo nodded, the emperor imperceptibly breathed a sigh of relief, and then began to drive them out. Okay, Jin is tired, you all can go out." He said so, and after waking up, he seemed to be fine. Although Gong Yimo was a little worried, she didn't want to disturb his rest, so she took Gong Dai out. As soon as they left, The imperial doctors were also driven out, leaving only a few confidants in the room. Changshi helped the emperor up, and immediately a palace servant came over and let him rinse his mouth with water. "Your Majesty, why don't you let the princess look for it?" Changshi asked puzzledly. He felt that with Gong Yimo's ability, she would definitely be able to find it. Gong Cheng rinsed his mouth, and took the handkerchief to wipe his mouth. Finally, he held the golden silk handkerchief in his hand and said softly, "It's not that Jin doesn't want her to go, but..." Before Shualian passed away, she begged, saying that in the future, no matter what, Moa cannot be allowed to look for the Shui country's treasure, and it's best not to contact any Shui country's people. Chapter 398. Why is that? Changshi didn't understand. When Imperial concubine Shui was dying, Emperor Cheng drove everyone out, so he held Gong Yimo and guarded outside the door. He didn't know what Imperial concubine Shui said. Emperor Cheng shook his head. "Shui Lian didn't say anything, she just wanted me to agree. She also wanted me to expel all the people in Daiyu state who weren't assimilated. I did that." Since the emperor said so, Changshi didn't ask any more, because as long as Imperial concubine Shui said it, His Majesty will definitely do it. Thinking of this, he felt a little regretful. He really felt that if Shui country really had a treasure, the person who could find it must be the princess. Emperor Cheng thought of the past and fell into deep thought. Imperial concubine Shui was hiding something from him. He knew very well that she would rather die than give birth to Mo-er. It wasn't just because of maternal love. The child in her belly was different, she seemed to know it from the beginning. Later, after Mo-er was born, her performance was mediocre, so he slowly let down his guard. Otherwise, he would have thought that the Shui family did something to the child. Later, when Shui Lian died, he didn't care about Mo-er, so Mo-er stayed in the cold palace for 4 years. Later, when she appeared, Emperor Cheng couldn't help but like her, but at the same time, he was also deeply guarded against her. It's just that time reveals a person's heart. Everyone in this world may have bad intentions, but Mo-er wasn't. Her heart was bright and broad, and she couldn't tolerate any evil. There was no hatred in her eyes, her human nature was righteous. This was also why he liked her more and more. She was a very good child, and she deserved the best in the world. Changshi was also a little absent-minded. Should he say it? If he said it, with His Majesty's importance to the princess and the prince, he didn't know how sad he would be. And with His Majesty's thoughts, he might do something extreme. But if he didn't say it, would it be good to let them go on like this? When he thought of Gong Yimo's concern for His Majesty, her natural worry, and every time she would seriously call him eunuch Changshi, her attitude was very respectful. Changshi's heart, he couldn't be ruthless. He was loyal to His Majesty, this would never change. But if he really talked about this matter, it wouldn't cause any harm to Daiyu state or His Majesty. Instead, it would cause a big uproar. Since it was like this, pretend he didn't know. As the days passed, Gong Yimo's letters flew out like snowflakes. She not only asked Lu Yi and Yu Heng for help, but also the crown prince. Of course, the main one was Gong Ju. His T. His. TTT. T. TTTTTS. TTT. TT. IT. You, he. He had so many subordinates, so she had to make good use of them. But while she was busy, the empress called her to attend a banquet. The emperor had just recovered from his illness, so the palace should be lively, but there was no need to do this every 2 or 3 days, right? Gong Yimo asked the palace maids to dress her up, then she went to Feng Chi Palace. Although it was almost July, the weather wasn't very hot. Gong Yimo wore a light green gauze dress, and politely tied her hair into a simple bun. Actually, if it were up to her, she would rather tie her hair in a ponytail. There was a small garden in Feng Chi Palace, which was planted with rare species that Gong Che had collected from all over the years. They were colorful all year round, and now was the time when they bloomed the brightest. From afar, a woman's laughter could be heard. Gong Yimo straightened her dress and walked in with her people. Seeing Gong Yimo come, the empress was naturally overjoyed. She believed that with the relationship between Moa and Che, Moa wouldn't forget about Che when she went out to sea in the future. So she quickly waved at her, indicating for her to sit by her side. Seeing Gong Yimo come, many of the noble ladies present were a little timid. But they had already seen Gong Yimo once a few days ago. She was very amiable throughout the whole process, and she was very simple and didn't put on any airs. So this time, they all boldly approached and sat around the Empress seat. Some of them hadn't seen Gong Yimo before, so they wanted to take a good look at her and see if she was similar to what they had imagined. Moa. Look, they all like you very much. In the future, you should come out and walk around more. I haven't seen you leave the palace since you came back. Gong Yimo smiled and glanced at Su Miaolan, who had been avoiding her since she came in, and said softly, Imperial Mother is right. In the future, this son will definitely come out and walk around more. Only then was the Empress satisfied. Thinking of something, she pointed at Su Miaolan and said, This is your sister-in-law. She's getting married in a few days. Originally, she shouldn't be going out now, but this child misses me and is filial. Moa, you should also meet her. Gong Yimo looked at Su Miaolan and called her sister-in-law with a grin. Now that she faced Su Miaolan again, she was completely at ease. Although there was a grudge in her heart, she was just like Gong Dai and Gong Che. If they didn't do anything to hurt her, she had no reason to hold a grudge against them. It was too tiring. Hearing her call her sister-in-law, Su Miaolan hurriedly responded, but her eyes were still evasive. Those who didn't know would think that Gong Yimo had bullied her before. Gong Yimo smiled calmly and didn't deny it. Because they weren't on the same level and couldn't be her opponent. However, Su Miaolan's expression was seen by her close friends. They thought, Princess Jiyu must have bullied Sister Miaolan before. Otherwise, Sister Miaolan wouldn't show a frightened expression every time they talked about her and tell them to stop talking about her. That girl looked at Gong Yimo and thought, she wasn't that scary. What's wrong with being a princess? Can a princess be unreasonable? She pushed Su Miaolan. Sister, didn't you say that you have a gift for the Empress? Hearing this, Su Miaolan glanced at her with a smile. Yes, I almost forgot. Thank you. Being praised, the girl was rather embarrassed. Then, she looked at Gong Yimo with some pride. She believed that once Sister Miaolan took out her gift, it would definitely overshadow this princess's limelight. The Empress was interested when she heard this, but she still said, Child, we're going to be a family soon. Why are you still so polite? Su Miaolan blushed. This is just a token of Miaolan's sincerity. As she spoke, she handed the box over. The Empress opened it and saw that it was a pair of purple pearl earrings. They shone brilliantly, exquisitely, and beautifully. These purple pearls were hard to come by, and such a beautiful purple color was even rarer. At this moment, someone said, this is Master Body's work. He only makes one piece of jewelry a year. Sister Miaolan is so thoughtful. Gong Yimo glanced at them and didn't comment. However, the others around her were already praising it. Master Body's work was indeed rare. No wonder they were so excited. At this moment, Su Miaolan glanced at Gong Yimo and said with a smile, Master Body has some connections with my mother. Another day, I'll have Master Body make one for the princess. I didn't know that the princess would come today. My apologies. At this moment, everyone noticed that although Gong Yimo was a princess, she only wore a single piece of jewelry on her head. It was extremely plain. Chapter 400. When the Crown Prince had returned, he had gifted her Cloud Orchid Brocade and the Empress Cloud Flower Brocade. These were the third and second best brocades in the Yuhan Kingdom. At that time, she had thought that this was the limit. After all, the number 1 Cloud Sky Brocade was something that even the Emperor of the Yuhan Kingdom did not have many bolts of. Moreover, at that time, the two kingdoms had yet to establish trade relations. However, who knew that it was not that the Crown Prince did not obtain the Cloud Sky Brocade. Instead, he had kept it and directly gifted it to Gong Yimo. How could she not be jealous? She was the Crown Prince's soon-to-be wife. However, the Crown Prince treated her, his wife, worse than his half-sister. She could not accept this. She could not accept this. At this moment, Everyone was surrounding Gong Yimo and asking her all sorts of questions with an envious look on their faces. Gong Yimo sighed in her heart. Those things were all gifts from other people. She still had 7 or 8 pieces of jewelry that were also from the hands of Brocade Master. They were either gifts from Gong Dai or Kim Yoon. She did not think that they were rare. She only knew that Brocade Master had a great reputation. However, when she saw how eager these noble ladies were, she realized how great Brocade Master's reputation was. When the girl beside Su Miaolan saw that Su Miaolan's limelight had been stolen, she could not help but speak up in dissatisfaction. Sister Miaolan wanted to gift this purple pearl earring to Her Highness the moment she received it. The princess has just returned from a long journey. She must have also brought a gift for Her Highness, right? Why not take it out and let us broaden our horizons? She was saying that Gong Yimo was unfilial. She had hidden good things for herself, unlike Su Miaolan, who eagerly offered them out. Gong Yimo looked at the girl who had repeatedly caused trouble for her. Her heavy gaze lightly swept over her. The girl felt as if she had been scraped by something sharp. Her little thoughts seemed to have been seen through by Gong Yimo. She was immediately speechless and did not dare to say anything. Therefore, they were not on the same level. If it was a few years ago, Gong Yimo might have been in the mood to flirt with these girls. However, she simply could not bring herself to do so now. Seeing that the girl had quieted down, Gong Yimo directly took out a brocade box from her bosom and opened it. Unexpectedly, it was a seemingly ordinary white jade bracelet. Gong Yimo did not have any patterns on it. But everyone felt that this thing was definitely extraordinary. Gong Yimo did not have any ordinary items. Sure enough, as everyone expected, after the white jade bracelet was taken out, there was actually a projection of a phoenix's tail on the ground under the sunlight. This was also Brocade Master's work. Everyone was doubtful. Could it be that the works of Jin Shou Grandmaster have become so worthless? Why did Gong Yimo take out 2 pieces at once? They were still in shock. Gong Yimo handed the bracelet to the Empress and gently smiled. It's not anything good. It's mainly a token of my appreciation. Imperial Mother, please don't dislike it. At this time, someone could not help but laugh. Gong Yimo took out Brocade Master's work, but her attitude was very casual. She only used it to express her appreciation. As for Su Miaolan, it was as if she had never seen anything good before. After receiving Master Body's work, she eagerly brought them here to present it. Therefore, a princess was a princess. Her bearing and vision were far from ordinary women. Some people thought that after becoming the Crown Prince's imperial concubine, they would reach the heavens in a single bound. Unexpectedly, they were still so petty. This laugh made Su Miaolan feel as if she had been slapped in the face. Her face burned red. The Empress saw that she had the intention to help and said with a smile, "Good, good. Every one of you is a good child. Whether it's a bracelet or an earring, I like them very much. Reward them." As she spoke, the Empress bestowed many things. Although people were envious, they gradually did not mention this matter again. At this time, someone suddenly shouted, "The Crown Prince has arrived." Hearing this voice, everyone was surprised and excited. Now that the Crown Prince's position was stable, he was gentle and rich. It could be said that he was the dream partner in the hearts of all the noble ladies in the capital. Even if they married him as a concubine or even a concubine, when the Crown Prince ascended the throne, they would still have the honor of being an imperial concubine. What's more, it was said that the Crown Prince kept his chastity for the Crown Prince's imperial concubine and did not have a single woman by his side. They all had a chance. "Sister Miaolan, did His Highness the Crown Prince come to see you?" Usually, the Crown Prince never attends private banquet. Someone happily whispered in Su Miaolan's ear. Su Miaolan shyly lowered her head and heard the Crown Prince greeting the Empress. Immediately after, the noble ladies tenderly greeted him. Gong Che smiled and said that they were excused. However, his gaze involuntarily fell on Gong Yimo's body. At first glance, he was stunned. He discovered that Gong Yimo was actually so beautiful with her hair down. She was so beautiful that it was soul-stirring. And the clothes she was wearing were made from the material he had given her. Thinking of this, His gaze became more fervent and he directly sat next to Gong Yimo. There was nothing wrong with him sitting there. After all, Gong Yimo and he were of equal status. Only she had the qualifications to sit next to the crown prince and not below him. Thus, everyone discovered that the two of them sitting together were actually so compatible that Su Miaolan was directly compared to the dust. The empress said with some surprise, "My son, why are you here?" Gong Che said without hesitation, "This son is here to find Moa. There are some problems on the ship that I need Moa's help to solve." Hearing that it was serious business, the empress definitely wouldn't stop him. Instead, she lovingly looked at Gong Yimo. "In that case, I've troubled Moa. Che, you too. It's rare for Moa to come out, but you snatched her away before she even had a chance." Gong Yimo hurriedly smiled, "Let's meet again next time." Then, Imperial Mother, this son will leave first. She really couldn't sit through this boring banquet. The empress smiled, "Go ahead." During this conversation, Gong Che actually didn't even look at Su Miaolan. Many people noticed this and looked at Su Miaolan with some evil intentions. Only then did the empress realize that something was wrong and said, "Che, wait. This child, why didn't you say goodbye to your wife before leaving?" Gong Che finally glanced at Su Miaolan, but it was only a glance before he looked away. "Imperial Mother, business is more important. This son won't accompany you any longer." After saying that, he pulled Gong Yimo and left. Su Miaolan's face was cold as she tore her handkerchief. The empress also realized something and asked, "Miaolan, did something happen between the two of you?" Hearing this, Su Miaolan shook her head. "Imperial Mother is overthinking. The wedding is imminent. What could happen? Crown Prince Gij's business is more important. It's fine." However, the empress still felt strange. On the other side, Gong Yimo also asked, "Crown Prince Gij, why are you so cold to Su Miaolan? Isn't she your daughter-in-law?" Speaking of this, Gong Che couldn't help but glare at the little minx beside him. He sighed and didn't answer. In the past 6 months, he had discussed with the Marquis that he had no interest in Su Miaolan and wanted to break off the marriage. Of course, when the time came, he would push all the blame onto himself and find a suitable husband for Su Miaolan. At first, the Marquis didn't agree. Later, under the drive of benefits, he agreed. However, this matter somehow spread to Su Miaolan's ears. In order to marry him, she actually drugged him and almost lost her virginity to him before the wedding. As a result, there was no other way. This marriage, he couldn't refuse. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.